The massive space station called Nexus floated in the darkness between star systems. It was neutral ground, a place where different alien species could meet without fear of attack. Today, the station buzzed with activity as ships from 12 different worlds arrived one after another. Admiral Kethvar stood in the main meeting hall, his blue skin gleaming under the artificial lights. He belonged to a race called the Hegemony, tall beings with 4 arms and eyes that could see in many different colors. Around him, other alien representatives took their places at the large round table. The crystalline Vextai representatives looked like living diamonds, their bodies making soft, musical sounds as they moved. Their leader, Prism Singer Velnath, sat perfectly still, light bending around her transparent form. Next to them, the Luminari delegates appeared as balls of pure energy contained in special suits that let them interact with solid matter. Hive Queen Zalthera of the Zephyrians clicked, her mandibles nervously. Her insect-like body was covered in chitinous armor that shifted colors based on her mood. Currently, it showed deep red patterns that meant worry and anger. Around the table, other species gathered. The plant-like Sylvans, the mechanical construct, collective, and 8 other races that made up the Galactic Council. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Admiral Kethvar began, his voice carrying through the translation devices that allowed all species to understand each other. "We face a crisis that threatens every civilization in this galaxy." Hikai pressed a button on his control device, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the table. The image showed a massive ship floating in space, so large that it dwarfed everything around it. The vessel stretched for kilometers, its hull covered in strange geometric patterns and mysterious devices. "This is the latest creation of the humans," Kethvar said, his voice heavy with concern. "They call it a Titan-class ship. Our intelligence networks have confirmed that this is not just a warship. It is something far more dangerous." The Luminari delegate, a being of pure energy called Radiance of Dawn, pulsed brighter. "How dangerous could one ship be, even if it is large?" Kethvar manipulated the display, showing detailed scans of the human vessel. "Our sensors cannot fully penetrate its hull, but what we can detect is terrifying. The energy readings are unlike anything we have ever seen. The weapon systems appear to use technology that we do not understand. And most concerning of all, there are temporal distortions around the ship." Prism Singer Velnath's crystalline body rang with a low, ominous note. "Temporal distortions? The humans are playing with time itself?" "It appears so," Kethvar replied grimly. "We all know how quickly these humans have advanced. What took our civilizations millions of years to develop, they achieved in mere thousands. They went from primitive tool users to spacefaring in less time than it takes most species to develop basic agriculture." Hive Queen Zalthara's chitin armor shifted to deep purple, the color of fear. Her species existed partially outside normal time, which made them sensitive to temporal disturbances. If they can manipulate time, they could attack us before we even know they have moved. They could change the past to prevent our species from ever evolving. The representative from the Construct Collective, a robot designated Unit Prime 7, processed this information through its quantum computers. Analysis confirms human technological advancement rate is 847.6% faster than galactic average. Projected capabilities in 10 standard years, complete galactic domination probability 78.4%. A murmur of concern rippled through the assembled delegates. The Sylvan representative, a tree-like being called Root Whisper San, rustled his leaves anxiously. "In all our thousands of years of existence, we have seen aggressive species before, but none have advanced so quickly or developed such dangerous technologies." Kethvar nodded solemnly. "The humans claim their ship is for peaceful purposes, but we cannot ignore the threat it represents. Our own intelligence suggests they are building more of these vessels. If we allow them to complete their fleet, it may be too late to stop them." The energy being called Radiance of Dawn flickered with uncertainty. "What do you propose we do? The humans have not actually attacked anyone." "Not yet," Kethavar replied, "but we cannot wait for them to strike first. Once they activate whatever weapons that ship carries, we may not have the chance to defend ourselves." He brought up another holographic display, this one showing star charts and fleet positions. "I have spent the last several weeks coordinating with our military commanders. We can assemble a joint fleet of 10,000 ships from all our civilizations. It would be the largest armada in galactic history." The room fell silent as the delegates considered this proposal. 10,000 ships represented an enormous commitment of resources and personnel. It would leave many systems with reduced defenses. Prism Singer. Velnath sang a questioning note. "Are you certain this is necessary? Perhaps we could try diplomacy first?" Kethavar's expression grew darker. "We have tried to establish meaningful contact with the humans many times. They are polite but secretive. They share no real information about their technologies or their intentions. They claim to want peace, but they continue building weapons like this." Unit Prime 7's mechanical voice added to the discussion. "Statistical analysis of human behavior patterns shows high probability of deception. Their statements about peaceful intentions do not match their military buildup." Hive Queen Zalthara clicked her mandibles in agreement. "My people have felt the temporal disturbances growing stronger. Whatever the humans are doing with time, it is affecting space itself. We can sense ripples in the fabric of reality emanating from their territory." Root Whisper San's leaves rustled with worry. "If they can control time, they could prevent our civilizations from ever meeting. They could go back and stop us from forming this alliance." The implications of this statement sent waves of fear through the assembled delegates. The ability to change the past was perhaps the most terrifying weapon imaginable. Kethavar stood up, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of determination. "We cannot allow this threat to grow any larger. Every day we delay gives the humans more time to complete their preparations. If we act now, while they have only one of these ships, we might still have a chance." The luminary delegate pulsed with nervous energy. "But attacking them without provocation, it goes against everything the Galactic Council stands for." "Protecting our species is what the Council stands for," Kethavar replied firmly. "Sometimes protection requires difficult choices." The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued for attempting diplomatic contact one more time. Others wanted to issue an ultimatum, demanding that the humans surrender their temporal technology. But as the discussion progressed, it became clear that most of the representatives believed the threat was too great to ignore. Finally, Prism Singer Velnath called for a formal vote. All in favor of assembling a joint fleet to neutralize the human temporal weapon? One by one, the delegates raised their appendages, tentacles, or energy fields in agreement. The Vextai voted yes. The Luminari voted yes. The Zephyrians voted yes. Each of the 12 species represented at the table agreed that action was necessary. "The motion passes unanimously," Velnath announced, her crystalline body ringing with a sound like funeral bells. "Admiral Kethavar, you are authorized to begin fleet assembly immediately." Kethavar bowed his head solemnly. "I will send word to all military commanders within the hour. Our ships will begin gathering at the edge of human space within 10 standard days." As the meeting broke up, the delegates spoke quietly among themselves. Many expressed hope that the humans would see reason and surrender their dangerous technology without a fight. Others worried about the casualties that might result from such a massive military operation. Hive Queen Zalthara approached Kethavar as he prepared to leave. "Admiral, my people's temporal senses are telling us something disturbing. The distortions around the human ship are not just random fluctuations. There is a pattern to them, as if they are building towards something specific." Kethavar's blue skin paled slightly. "What kind of something?" "We are not certain," the insectoid Queen replied. But it feels like a countdown, as if the humans are preparing for a single massive use of their temporal technology. This information made Kethvar even more determined to act quickly. If the humans were planning some kind of temporal attack, the combined fleet needed to stop them before they could carry it out. Over the next several days, ships began arriving at the designated assembly point near the edge of human space. Massive dreadnoughts from the hegemony joined sleek cruisers from the Vextai homeworld. The Luminari contributed energy-based vessels that looked like captured stars, while the Zephyrians brought swarm ships that could separate into thousands of smaller fighters. Each species contributed their most advanced warships and their most experienced crews. The assembled fleet represented the combined military might of 12 civilizations, accumulated over millions of years of technological development. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching as more ships continued to arrive. The sight should have filled him with confidence, but instead he felt a growing sense of unease. The temporal distortions that the Zephyrians detected were getting stronger, and their countdown pattern was accelerating. His communications officer approached with the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, our scouts report that the human ship has moved to the outer edge of their solar system. It appears to be charging some kind of massive energy weapon." Kethvar studied the tactical displays showing the positions of both fleets. The humans had assembled their own defensive force, but it was tiny compared to the Council Armada. Perhaps 200 ships at most, including their single massive vessel. "Sir," his science officer called out, "we are detecting massive energy buildups throughout human space. It appears they are channeling power from multiple star systems into their Titan-class ship." The Admiral's worst fears seemed to be coming true. The humans were preparing for something big, and they were using the power of entire solar systems to do it. Whatever temporal weapon they had built, it was about to be activated. "Send word to all fleet commanders," Kethvar ordered. "We advance, immediately. We cannot allow the humans to complete whatever they are planning." The largest armada in galactic history began moving toward Earth, carrying the hopes and fears of 12 different civilizations. None of them knew that they were about to become part of the very solution they feared to prevent. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, looking out at the stars through the massive viewing windows. The ship around her was unlike anything humanity had ever built before. At 5 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, it was more like a floating city than a traditional spacecraft. But Elena knew the truth that the approaching alien fleet did not. The Prometheus was not a weapon of war. It was humanity's last, desperate attempt to save the universe itself. "Captain," called out her science officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, "we are receiving updates from Earth Command. The alien fleet now numbers over 10,000 ships and is approaching fast." Elena nodded grimly. She had expected this reaction from the other species. From the outside, the Prometheus certainly looked like a weapon. Its hull was covered with massive geometric arrays that pulsed with energy. Strange devices extended from its surface like metallic growths. To an observer who did not know its true purpose, it would appear to be the ultimate weapon of destruction. "Any word from Dr. Chen?" Elena asked, referring to Sarah's father, who was the chief scientist on the project. "He is still in the main laboratory running final calculations," Sarah replied. "He says we need at least 6 more hours to complete the charging sequence." Elena looked at the tactical display showing the approaching alien armada. "We may not have 6 hours. Deep within the ship, Dr. James Chen worked frantically at his computer terminals. Around him, the most advanced technology humanity had ever created hummed with barely contained power. The room was filled with devices that bent space and time, equipment that existed partially in multiple dimensions at once. Dr. Chen paused in his work and thought back to how it all began. 3 years ago, human scientists had been studying the effects of faster-than-light travel on the fabric of space-time. What they discovered had filled them with horror. Every time a ship used its FTL drive, it created tiny tears in the dimensional fabric that held reality together. For a single journey, the damage was microscopic and healed itself naturally, but over the past 1,000 years, millions of ships from dozens of species had been using FTL technology throughout the galaxy. The cumulative effect was catastrophic. Space-time itself was unraveling, like a piece of cloth that had been pulled, and stretched until threads began to break. Dr. Chen's calculations showed that within 50 years, the damage would reach a critical point. Reality would collapse in a cascade failure that would destroy not just the galaxy, but potentially the entire universe. The worst part was that none of the other species seemed to have noticed. Their science was advanced, but they had never specifically looked for this type of cumulative damage. They had been accidentally destroying the universe for centuries without realizing it. Dr. Chen had presented his findings to the human government, expecting them to immediately contact the other species and work together on a solution. Instead, he had been sworn to secrecy and ordered to find a way to fix the problem without revealing it to anyone else. The reason was simple. If humanity announced that FTL travel was destroying the universe, the other species would either not believe them or would blame them for the discovery. Either way, the result would likely be war, which would prevent any solution from being implemented. So humanity had been forced to work alone, using resources from across their entire civilization, to build a device capable of repairing the damage. The Prometheus was not a ship in any traditional sense. It was a massive temporal field generator, designed to weave the torn fabric of space-time back together. The technology had been partially reverse-engineered from ancient artifacts found buried on Earth. Apparently, a previous civilization had faced the same crisis millions of years ago. They had failed to solve it in time, leaving behind only scattered pieces of their attempted solution for humanity to find. Dr. Chen had spent 2 years figuring out how the ancient technology worked, and another year building a device powerful enough to repair the damage across an entire galaxy. The process required enormous amounts of energy, channeled through quantum field generators that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. "Dr. Chen," came his daughter's voice over the communication system, "the alien fleet will be here in less than 4 hours. How much longer do you need?" "At least 6 hours for a complete repair," he replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Maybe 3 hours for a partial fix that would buy us more time." "The aliens are not going to give us 3 hours," Sarah said grimly. "They think we are building a weapon to destroy them." Dr. Chen understood their fear. From the outside, the Prometheus would appear to be exactly what they thought it was. The quantum field generators looked like exotic weapons. The temporal distortions around the ship would seem like preparation for some kind of time-based attack. Back on the bridge, Captain Vasquez was dealing with an impossible situation. Earth Command had been clear in their orders: complete the temporal repair project at any cost. The survival of the universe depended on it. But the approaching alien fleet was equally determined to stop what they saw as an existential threat to their civilizations. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth Command." "Put it through," Elena replied. The face of Admiral Rebecca Martinez appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and worried, the weight of humanity's secret pressing down on her shoulders. "Captain Vasquez, what is your status?" "The Prometheus is operating normally, Admiral. Dr. Chen estimates 6 hours to completion, but the alien fleet will be here in 4. Admiral Martinez closed her eyes for a moment. "Elena, I am about to share classified information with you. The Prometheus is not just important to humanity. It is the only thing standing between the universe and complete destruction." Elena had suspected that the project was more significant than she had been told, but hearing it confirmed still shocked her. "Admiral, can you be more specific?" "FTL travel has been tearing holes in space-time for centuries," Martinez explained. "The damage is cumulative and approaching a critical failure point. If we do not repair it within the next 50 years, reality itself will collapse. The bridge crew listened in stunned silence as the Admiral continued. Dr. Chen's device is our only hope of fixing the damage before it is too late. The alien species do not know about the crisis, and we cannot tell them without risking a war that would prevent us from completing the solution. Elena felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Complete the mission at any cost," Martinez replied. "If humanity dies but the universe survives, that is an acceptable outcome. If the universe dies because we failed to complete the project, then everyone dies anyway." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Elena looked around at her crew, seeing the same mix of fear and determination on every face. "You heard the Admiral," she said quietly. "We are not just defending humanity anymore. We are defending everything that exists." Lieutenant Commander Chen worked at her station, coordinating with her father in the laboratory. "Captain, Dr. Chen says the charging process cannot be accelerated without risking a catastrophic failure that would make the situation worse." Elena nodded. "Then we defend the ship for as long as possible and hope the aliens see reason before it is too late." In the laboratory, Dr. Chen continued his work while monitoring the approaching fleet. He had spent months trying to figure out a way to prove to the aliens that humanity was trying to help rather than harm them. The problem was that any demonstration of the temporal technology would look like a weapon test. The quantum field generators were designed to operate on a galactic scale. Testing them would create space-time distortions that could be detected across dozens of star systems. To species that did not understand the technology, it would appear that humanity was preparing to attack reality itself. Dr. Chen had considered trying to explain the situation through diplomatic channels, but the mathematics involved were incredibly complex. It had taken him 2 years to fully understand the problem, even with access to the ancient artifacts. Trying to convince 12 different alien species in a matter of hours seemed impossible. As he worked, Dr. Chen noticed something interesting in his sensor readings. The approaching alien fleet was generating its own temporal distortions through their FTL drives. The massive number of ships arriving at once was actually accelerating the space-time damage in the local area. This gave him an idea. If the aliens attacked the Prometheus with their energy weapons, that energy could potentially be channeled into the quantum field generators. It would be incredibly dangerous and would require precise timing, but it might provide enough power to complete the repair process ahead of schedule. "Sarah," he called to his daughter on the bridge, "I need to speak with Captain Vasquez immediately." A few minutes later, Elena arrived in the laboratory. Dr. Chen quickly explained his idea while showing her the energy calculations on his computer screens. "You want to let them shoot at us?" Elena asked, incredulously. "Not exactly," Dr. Chen replied. "I want to use their weapons fire as an additional power source. If we can channel the energy from 10,000 ships directly into our quantum field generators, we might be able to complete the repair in minutes instead of hours." Elena studied the calculations, trying to understand the implications. "What are the risks?" "If we miscalculate the energy levels, the Prometheus could be destroyed instantly," Dr. Chen admitted. "If we channel too much power too quickly, we could create a temporal explosion that would damage space-time even worse than the original problem. And if we do nothing? The aliens destroy us before we can complete the repair, and the universe dies in 50 years anyway." Elena realized that they were facing an impossible choice between certain death and a slim chance of success. But given what was at stake, there was really only one option. "How long would you need to modify the field generators?" she asked. 2 hours, maybe less if I skip the safety protocols. Elena made her decision. "Do it. I will try to buy you as much time as possible." As Dr. Chen began frantically modifying his equipment, Elena returned to the bridge to prepare for the most important battle in the history of the universe. She only hoped that when it was over, there would still be a universe left to save. Ambassador Sarah Kim sat in the cramped cabin of the courier ship Hermes as it raced through space toward the alien armada. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it was probably suicide, but humanity's only hope for survival lay in convincing the aliens that they were not the enemy. The small ship carried no weapons and minimal shields. Its only purpose was to deliver Sarah and her message to the alien fleet before they reached Earth. In her hands, she held a datapad containing humanity's complete research on the temporal crisis, detailed scientific proofs, and a formal request for cooperation rather than destruction. "Ambassador, we are approaching the alien fleet," called out the ship's pilot, Commander Jake Morrison. "They have 10,000 ships spread across a formation that stretches for millions of kilometers." Sarah looked out the window at the approaching armada. She had seen pictures, but the reality was overwhelming. Ships of dozens of different designs filled the space ahead of them, from crystalline vessels that looked like living gemstones to energy beings contained in glowing spheres. "Are they responding to our communication requests?" she asked. "Yes, Ambassador. The lead ship is granting us permission to dock, but they are warning us that any aggressive action will result in immediate destruction." Sarah nodded. She had expected nothing less. From the alien's perspective, she was a representative of a species that had just built the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. The Hermes approached the massive flagship of the alien fleet, a vessel called the Eternal Dominion, that belonged to the hegemony. As they drew closer, Sarah could see weapon batteries tracking their movement and hundreds of smaller ships maintaining a defensive perimeter around the flagship. The docking process was tense, with alien security forces escorting Sarah and her small diplomatic team through corridors filled with four-armed blue beings carrying advanced weapons. The architecture of the alien ship was beautiful but intimidating, with curved walls and surfaces that seemed to flow like water. Finally, they arrived at a conference room where Admiral Kethavar was waiting along with representatives from several other species. Sarah recognized some of them from intelligence briefings: the crystalline Vextai, the energy-based Luminari, and the insectoid Zephyrians. "Ambassador Kim," Admiral Kethavar said, his voice carrying a tone of barely controlled hostility. "You have requested this meeting to discuss humanity's surrender, I presume." Sarah took a deep breath and activated her translation device to ensure all species could understand her words. "Admiral, I have come here to prevent a terrible misunderstanding that could result in the destruction of everything we all hold dear, the I." Alien leaders exchanged glances. Prism singer Velnath, the Vextai representative, made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Explain this misunderstanding, human." Sarah placed her datapad on the table and activated its holographic display. The image showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of tiny red spots scattered throughout. "What you are seeing are the cumulative effects of faster-than-light travel on the fabric of space-time itself," she began. "Every time any of our ships uses FTL technology, it creates microscopic tears in the dimensional structure that holds reality together." Admiral Kethavar leaned forward, studying the display with interest despite his suspicion. "And you expect us to believe that you discovered something our scientists missed?" "Not missed," Sarah replied carefully. "Simply never looked for. Our research indicates that most species focus on improving FTL efficiency rather than studying its long-term effects on space-time stability." She manipulated the display to show a time-lapse simulation of the damage accumulating over centuries. The red spots grew larger and began connecting with each other, forming a web of instability across the galaxy. "According to our calculations, the damage will reach a critical threshold within 50 years, Sarah continued. "When that happens, space-time will collapse in a cascade failure that will destroy not just our galaxy, but potentially the entire universe." Hive Queen Zalthara's chitinous armor shifted to deep orange, indicating intense concentration. Her species' ability to perceive temporal distortions made her particularly sensitive to what Sarah was describing. "The temporal distortions we have been detecting she clicked. They are related to this? Yes, Sarah replied, encouraged by the first sign of understanding. The Prometheus is not a weapon. It is a temporal field generator designed to repair the damage before it becomes irreversible. The luminary representative radiance of dawn pulsed with skeptical energy. You expect us to believe that your massive ship, bristling with unknown technology, is actually meant to help us? Sarah activated another part of her presentation, showing detailed schematics of the Prometheus's internal systems. These are not weapons. They are quantum field generators capable of weaving space-time back together. The process requires enormous amounts of energy, which is why the ship is so large. Admiral Kethvar studied the technical diagrams with growing suspicion. Even if what you say is true, why would humanity work on this problem in secret? Why not contact the Council and request assistance? This was the question Sarah had been dreading. The honest answer would likely end any chance of cooperation, but lying would be worse. Because we knew you would react exactly as you have, she said quietly. You would either not believe us, or you would blame humanity for discovering the problem. Either way, the result would be conflict that would prevent a solution from being implemented. The room fell silent as the alien representatives processed this statement. Sarah could see anger building in several of their expressions. Unit Prime 7, the mechanical representative of the Construct Collective, spoke in its emotionless voice. Statistical analysis indicates 73.2% probability that this is an elaborate deception designed to prevent defensive action against human temporal weapons. I understand your skepticism, Sarah replied, but I can provide real-time data from our sensors that will prove what I am telling you. She activated a quantum entanglement communicator, a device that allowed instantaneous communication across any distance. Dr. James Chen, the lead scientist on the project, is standing by to answer any technical questions and provide verification of our data. The face of Dr. Chen appeared in the holographic display, showing him surrounded by the complex equipment inside the Prometheus. Sarah could see the strain on his face as he worked frantically to complete the modifications needed for their desperate plan. Dr. Chen, Admiral Kethvar said coldly, you claim to be saving the universe. Prove it. Dr. Chen looked up from his work, his expression serious. Admiral, I can show you real-time measurements of the space-time distortions throughout this sector. Our sensors are detecting increasing instability that correlates exactly with the arrival of your fleet. He manipulated his controls, and the display showed a complex web of measurements indicating temporal stress patterns around the alien armada. Your 10,000 ships using FTL drives simultaneously is creating exactly the kind of cumulative damage I described, Dr. Chen continued. Each individual ship causes minimal harm, but together you are accelerating the crisis. Prism singer Velnath sang a questioning note. If this is true, why have our own scientists not detected it? Because you have never had 10,000 ships in one location before, Dr. Chen replied. The effect is only noticeable when the concentration of FTL distortions reaches a critical density. Hive Queen Zalthara's armor shifted to pale yellow, the color of dawning understanding. The countdown pattern we have been sensing, it is not a weapon charging. It is the universe itself approaching a breaking point. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. Exactly. And unless we complete our repair process soon, that breaking point will be reached regardless of whether you destroy us or not. The alien leaders began talking among themselves in their various languages. Sarah could see that some of them were beginning to consider the possibility that humanity was telling the truth, but others remained deeply suspicious. Admiral Kethvar turned back to the display. Even if we accept your explanation, how do we know that your repair process will not make things worse? How do we know this is not some kind of temporal weapon, disguised as a solution? This was the crucial moment. Sarah knew that her next words would determine whether diplomacy had any chance of succeeding. Because we are willing to share all of our research with you, she said. Complete technical specifications, theoretical frameworks, everything. You can verify our calculations with your own scientists. She uploaded a massive data file to the alien computer systems. This contains 3 years of research, including the mathematical proofs that FTL travel damages space-time and the detailed plans for repairing that damage. The alien representatives began reviewing the data through their various technological interfaces. Sarah waited nervously as minutes passed, watching their expressions for any sign of understanding. Finally, Unit Prime 7 spoke. Initial analysis suggests mathematical frameworks are consistent with known physics. However, conclusions contradict established understanding of space-time stability. Because you have never studied long-term cumulative effects, Dr. Chen interjected. Your science focuses on immediate practical applications, not subtle damage that accumulates over centuries. Admiral Kethvar's expression remained skeptical. Even if your science is correct, the timing is suspicious. You discover this crisis just as you build a massive ship capable of manipulating time itself? Sarah felt her heart sinking as she realized that the aliens' suspicion was too deep to overcome with mere evidence. They had already decided that humanity was a threat, and no amount of scientific data would change their minds. The breaking point came when Zalthara suddenly stood up, her armor flashing bright red. I am detecting massive temporal energy building in the human ship. The countdown is accelerating. Dr. Chen's image showed him looking at his instruments with alarm. That is because your fleet's FTL drives are creating interference with our field generators. The proximity of so many ships is destabilizing our equipment. But to the aliens, this looked like confirmation of their worst fears. Admiral Kethvar stood up abruptly. You are activating your weapon while we sit here talking. This entire diplomatic meeting is a distraction. No, you do not understand, Sarah said desperately. The instability is caused by your ships, not ours. If you would just move your fleet away from our vessel... Enough lies, Kethvar declared. This meeting is over. You have exactly 1 hour to surrender your temporal weapon, or we will destroy it along with your entire planet. Sarah tried to protest, but alien security forces were already escorting her team toward the exit. As they walked through the corridors, she could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the ship. Ambassador, Commander Morrison whispered as they were forced back toward their ship. What do we do now? Sarah looked back at the conference room where the alien leaders were undoubtedly planning humanity's destruction. She had failed to convince them, and now both species were heading toward a conflict that could destroy everything. We pray that Dr. Chen can complete his work before they destroy us all, she replied quietly, as the Hermes undocked from the alien flagship. Sarah watched through the window as the massive armada began moving toward Earth. She had one last chance to warn humanity of what was coming. Get us back to the fleet as fast as possible, she ordered, and send an emergency message to Captain Vasquez. Tell her that diplomacy has failed and the aliens will attack within the hour. The small courier ship raced away from the alien armada, carrying the news that would force humanity to choose between defending themselves and saving the universe. Behind them, 10,000 alien warships prepared for what they believed would be a battle to save galactic civilization from human aggression. None of them realized that they were about to become part of the very solution they were trying to prevent. The Earth Defense Fleet hung in space like scattered stars against the darkness. 200 ships of various sizes formed a defensive line around the massive Prometheus, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant sun. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of humanity's only Titan-class vessel, watching as the largest armada in galactic history approached their position. Captain, reported her tactical officer, the alien fleet has moved into attack formation. We count 10,147 vessels across 12 different species. They are maintaining position at maximum weapons range. Elena nodded grimly. The Hermes had returned 30 minutes ago with Ambassador Kim's report that diplomacy had failed completely. The aliens were convinced that humanity was preparing to attack them with some kind of temporal weapon, and nothing Sarah had said could change their minds. "Any word from Dr. Chen?" Elena asked. "He says the modifications are complete," replied Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. "But he needs at least another hour to bring the field generators online safely." Elena looked at the tactical display showing the overwhelming alien force. Every ship in the Council Armada was larger and more advanced than anything in the human fleet. Even working together, Earth's defenders could not hope to defeat such overwhelming numbers. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the alien flagship." "Put it through," Elena ordered. The main screen showed Admiral Kethvar standing on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. His blue skin had darkened with anger, and his forearms gestured aggressively as he spoke. "Human vessel Prometheus, you have ignored our ultimatum and continued charging your temporal weapon. You leave us no choice but to defend ourselves and the galaxy from your aggression." Elena stepped forward, trying one last time to make the aliens understand. "Admiral Kethvar, you are making a terrible mistake. We are not your enemy. The device you think is a weapon is actually meant to save all of us." "Your lies will not work," Kethvar replied coldly. "Our sensors show massive temporal distortions, building around your ship. In exactly 30 minutes, we will open fire with the full strength of our combined fleet. You have that long to surrender." The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at a blank screen. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, each person understanding that they were about to face impossible odds. "Captain," Sarah Chen said quietly, "my father wants to speak with you privately." Elena made her way through the corridors of the Prometheus to the main laboratory where Dr. Chen was making final adjustments to his equipment. The quantum field generators hummed with barely contained energy, creating a sound like distant thunder that could be felt through the ship's hull. "Elena," Dr. Chen said without looking up from his controls, "I have been thinking about our situation. The aliens are going to attack with everything they have, and our shields cannot withstand that kind of firepower for more than a few minutes." "How long do you need to complete the temporal repair?" Elena asked. "At least 40 minutes for a full repair. Maybe 20 for a partial fix that would stabilize things temporarily." Elena shook her head. "We will be destroyed long before then." Dr. Chen finally turned to face her, his expression showing a mixture of desperation and determination. "Unless we use their attack as part of the solution." He brought up a series of calculations on his computer screens, showing complex energy flow diagrams and temporal field equations. "The quantum field generators need enormous amounts of power to operate on a galactic scale," he explained. "I have been channeling energy from 3 different star systems, but it is still not enough for a complete repair." Elena studied the diagrams, beginning to understand what he was suggesting. "You want to use the aliens' weapons as an additional power source?" "Exactly. 10,000 ships firing simultaneously would generate more energy than a dozen star systems. If we can channel that power directly into the field generators, we could complete the repair in minutes instead of hours," Elena finished. "But what are the risks?" Dr. Chen's expression grew grave. "If we miscalculate even slightly, the Prometheus will be vaporized instantly. If we channel too much energy too quickly, we could create a temporal explosion that would make our current crisis look minor." Elena thought about their options. They could try to fight the alien fleet conventionally, but that would only delay the inevitable. They could attempt to flee, but the aliens would pursue them and prevent completion of the repair. Or they could take an enormous gamble that might save the universe or destroy it. "What would you need me to do?" she asked. "When the aliens open, fire. I need you to drop all shields and let their weapons hit us directly," Dr. Chen replied. "The energy will be channeled through the ship's hull into the quantum field generators. But the timing has to be perfect." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You are asking me to make our ship completely defenseless against the largest military force in galactic history. I am asking you to trust me, Dr. Chen said quietly, and to trust that the universe is worth saving. Elena looked around the laboratory at the incredible technology that represented humanity's greatest achievement. In a few minutes, she would have to decide whether to risk everything on a plan that sounded like madness. How will we know if it is working? She asked. The temporal field will either stabilize space-time throughout the galaxy, or it will create a cascade failure that destroys everything within 1,000 light years. Dr. Chen replied honestly. We will know which one within seconds of the energy transfer beginning. Elena made her decision. I will give you the chance, Dr. Chen. But if this goes wrong, we will all be dead anyway, he replied, along with everyone else in the universe within 50 years. Elena returned to the bridge to prepare for the most desperate gamble in human history. Around her, the crew worked at their stations, unaware that their captain was about to order them to drop their defenses in the face of overwhelming enemy fire. Captain, her tactical officer reported, the alien fleet is moving into final attack position. All ships are charging. Weapons! Elena looked at the display showing thousands of energy signatures building throughout the alien armada. Each ship was preparing to fire with maximum power, intent on destroying the Prometheus before its supposed temporal weapon could be activated. All ships in the defense fleet, Elena announced over the communications system. You are ordered to withdraw to minimum safe distance immediately. Captain, her first officer asked in confusion. What about defending the Prometheus? The Prometheus will handle its own defense, Elena replied, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. As the human ships pulled back, leaving the massive Titan-class vessel alone in space, Elena opened a ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 10 minutes, we are going to attempt something that has never been tried before. Dr. Chen believes he can use the aliens' attack against us to power our temporal field generators and complete the space-time repair. She paused, letting her crew absorb this information. I will not lie to you about the risks. We may all die in the next few minutes, but if we succeed, we will save not just humanity, but every living being in the universe. The ship fell silent except for the humming of the quantum field generators. Elena could feel the weight of history pressing down on her as she prepared to give the most important order any human had ever spoken. Dr. Chen, she said over the intercom. Are you ready? As ready as we can be, came the reply. Field generators are online and standing by for energy input. Elena watched the countdown. Timer on her tactical display. 3 minutes until the alien attack began. She thought about her family back on Earth, about the billions of people depending on her decision, about the trillions of beings throughout the galaxy who had no idea their existence hung in the balance. Captain, her communications officer, reported, the aliens are hailing us one final time. On screen, Elena ordered. Admiral Kethvar appeared again, his expression showing no mercy. Human ship, this is your final warning. Surrender your temporal weapon or face the consequences. Elena took a deep breath and gave her response. Admiral, I hope someday you will understand that we were trying to save you, not destroy you. The transmission ended. Elena watched as energy readings throughout the alien fleet reached maximum levels. Every weapon on 10,000 ships was aimed directly at the Prometheus. All stations, prepare for impact, Elena announced. Dr. Chen, initiate emergency protocols. The quantum field generators throughout the ship began spinning up to maximum power, creating a sound like reality itself was being stretched. Elena could feel the temporal distortions building around them as space-time prepared to be either healed or destroyed. 30 seconds to alien weapons fire, her tactical officer reported. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing courage and determination on every face. These people had volunteered to risk everything for a chance to save the universe. 10 seconds, came the report. Elena gripped the arms of her command chair and spoke the words that would either save everything or destroy it all. All shields down. Let them hit us with everything they have. The bridge went dark, except for emergency lighting, as the ship's defensive systems shut down completely. Through the viewing windows, Elena could see thousands of energy beams racing toward them through space. In the laboratory, Dr. Chen watched his instruments as unimaginable amounts of destructive energy approached his ship. Everything depended on his calculations being correct and his timing being perfect. The fate of the universe was about to be decided in the next few seconds. The energy beams from 10,000 alien warships struck the Prometheus like the combined fury of dying stars, plasma bolts that could vaporize mountains, particle beams that could cut through planetary cores, and exotic weapons that bent the laws of physics themselves all converged on the massive human vessel. Admiral HFY stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching his sensors confirm what should have been the complete destruction of the human ship. The energy readings were off the scale, showing more destructive power concentrated in one place than had ever been recorded in galactic history. But then something impossible happened. The energy beams stopped moving, not deflected, not absorbed, but frozen in space like crystalline sculptures. Millions of deadly plasma bolts hung motionless in the void, their brilliant colors creating a vast web of light around the Prometheus. Particle beams stretched across kilometers of space, no longer moving toward their target, but suspended in time itself. "What is happening?" HFY demanded, staring at his instruments in disbelief. His science officer, a young hegemony engineer named Telvar, worked frantically at his console. "Admiral, all our weapons fire has stopped approximately 1,000 kilometers from the human ship. Energy readings show the beams are still active, but they are not advancing." Throughout the alien fleet, similar scenes of confusion played out on thousands of bridges. The crystalline Vextai watched in amazement as their harmonic weapons created frozen waves of sound in space. The energy beings of the Luminari found their pure energy attacks locked in temporal stasis, unable to complete their deadly journey. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Elena Vasquez experienced something beyond anything she had imagined. Time around the ship seemed to flow differently, with everything outside moving in slow motion, while the ship itself operated normally. "Dr. Chen," she called over the intercom, "what is happening out there?" Deep in the laboratory, Dr. Chen stared at his instruments with a mixture of awe and terror. The quantum field generators were operating far beyond their design parameters, channeling the energy from the alien attack through dimensional pathways that existed outside normal space-time. "It is working," he whispered, barely believing his own words. "The temporal field is stabilizing. We exist in a bubble of accelerated time while everything outside is locked in stasis." The energy from 10,000 alien weapons poured into the quantum field generators, providing exactly the power needed to complete the galactic repair. Dr. Chen watched as his displays showed space-time distortions throughout the galaxy beginning to heal themselves. The tears in reality that had been growing for centuries started to close. The web of instability that threatened universal collapse began to strengthen and stabilize. For the first time in 3 years, Dr. Chen allowed himself to hope that they might actually succeed. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "The temporal field will hold for approximately 12 minutes in our accelerated time frame," Dr. Chen replied. "That should be enough to complete the repair and record a message for the alien fleet." Elena realized they had been given an incredible opportunity. While the aliens were frozen in time, humanity could explain what had really happened and provide proof of their true intentions. "All hands," she announced over the ship's communication system. "We have 12 minutes to document everything and prepare a message that will convince the aliens we were telling the truth." Throughout the ship, the crew worked frantically to record data, compile evidence, and create a comprehensive explanation of the temporal crisis and its solution. They had access to real-time readings showing the space-time repairs taking place throughout the galaxy, providing undeniable proof of what the Prometheus had actually accomplished. Dr. Chen coordinated the scientific documentation while his daughter, Sarah, worked on the bridge to create a diplomatic presentation that would make sense to the alien leaders. They included detailed sensor readings, mathematical proofs, and visual demonstrations of the healing process. Dr. Chen, Elena called out as she reviewed the presentation, "We need to include something that will prove we could have used this technology as a weapon if we had wanted to." Dr. Chen understood immediately. "Show them the temporal field itself. We currently have 10,000 alien ships locked in time, unable to move or respond. If we were truly aggressive, we could destroy them all right now." This was indeed the ultimate proof of human intentions. The aliens had attacked with everything they had, and humanity had responded by freezing their weapons rather than turning them back on their creators. No aggressive species would have shown such restraint when given the power to destroy their enemies. As the minutes passed, Dr. Chen's instruments showed the space-time repairs nearing completion. The quantum field generators had successfully woven the torn fabric of reality back together across an area spanning thousands of light years. The immediate crisis was over. 5 minutes remaining, Dr. Chen reported. The repair is 98% complete. Space-time stability throughout this region is now stronger than it has been in centuries. Elena made final adjustments to their message while watching the frozen alien fleet through the viewing windows. It was an incredible sight. Thousands of massive warships suspended in time, their weapons fire creating a brilliant display of colors in the darkness of space. Dr. Chen, when the temporal field collapses, what will happen to the alien weapons? The energy will dissipate harmlessly, he replied. The beams have been channeled through our generators and converted into temporal field energy. When time resumes normal flow, there will be nothing left to hit us. As the final minutes counted down, Elena reflected on what they had accomplished. Humanity had faced the greatest crisis in universal history and found a solution that saved everyone, including those who had tried to destroy them. It was perhaps the most fundamentally human response possible, to risk everything to help others, even when those others saw them as enemies. 2 minutes remaining, Dr. Chen announced. All repairs are complete. Space-time is now stable throughout the galaxy. Elena activated the ship's communication system to record her final message. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the UES Prometheus. If you are receiving this message, it means our temporal field has collapsed and normal time has resumed. She looked directly into the camera, knowing that alien leaders throughout the fleet would soon be watching her words. What you experienced was not an attack, but a demonstration of what humanity could have done if we truly meant you harm. We held 10,000 of your ships in temporal stasis, and we chose to release you unharmed. The recording continued with Dr. Chen explaining the technical details of what had been accomplished, providing sensor data that showed the healed space-time throughout the galaxy. He demonstrated how the alien weapons fire had been converted into repair energy rather than being reflected back at their sources. 30 seconds, Dr. Chen called out. Elena felt the ship beginning to vibrate as the quantum field generators prepared to shut down. The temporal field that had protected them and enabled the repairs was about to collapse, returning them to normal space-time. All hands, prepare for temporal field collapse, Elena announced. The humming of the generators grew louder, then suddenly stopped. The feeling of accelerated time disappeared, and Elena could sense that the universe around them had returned to normal flow. Through the viewing windows, she watched as the frozen energy beams simply faded away, their destructive power completely dissipated. The alien fleet found themselves exactly where they had been before firing, but their weapons were no longer charged and their targets were no longer threatened. Captain, her communications officer reported, we are receiving hundreds of transmissions. from the alien fleet. They want to know what happened. Elena smiled for the first time in hours. Put Admiral Kethvar through first. The main screen showed the alien admiral standing on his bridge, his expression a mixture of confusion and awe. His blue skin had paled considerably, and his 4 arms gestured uncertainly. "Human vessel," he said slowly. "Our sensors show that space-time throughout this region has been repaired. The temporal distortions that my science officers detected are gone." "That is correct, Admiral," Elena replied. "The Prometheus has completed its mission. The universal crisis has been resolved." Kethvar looked at his instruments, clearly struggling to understand what had happened. "Our weapons, they should have destroyed your ship. Instead, they simply disappeared. We channeled their energy into our repair systems," Elena explained. "Your attack provided exactly the power we needed to complete the process. In a way, you helped us save the universe." Over the next several hours, scientists from 12 different species studied the data that humanity provided. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Space-time was indeed more stable than it had been in centuries. The crisis that had threatened universal destruction was over. Hive Queen Zalthara was among the first to publicly acknowledge the truth. Her species' sensitivity to temporal distortions allowed them to confirm that the repairs were real and complete. "The humans were telling the truth," she announced to the assembled fleet. "They have healed damage that we did not even know existed. The universe is safer now because of their actions." One by one, the other species reached the same conclusion. The scientific evidence was too strong to ignore, and the fact that humanity had shown such restraint when they possessed ultimate power proved their peaceful intentions. Dr. Chen emerged from his laboratory exhausted but triumphant. The project that had consumed 3 years of his life was complete, and the universe would continue to exist for billions of years to come. "Captain," he said to Elena, "I have been thinking about our next step. Now that the other species know about the space-time crisis, we should work together to develop better FTL technology that does not cause cumulative damage." Elena nodded. "It sounds like humanity is about to become very popular in the galactic community." Indeed, over the following days, representatives from all 12 species requested meetings to discuss technological cooperation and mutual defense agreements. The species that had come to destroy humanity now wanted to learn from them and work with them. Ambassador Sarah Kim, who had survived the diplomatic disaster that nearly led to war, found herself coordinating the largest peaceful first contact event in galactic history. The fear and suspicion that had driven the alien alliance was replaced by gratitude and respect. Admiral Kethvar personally apologized to Captain Vasquez, admitting that his preconceptions about human aggression had nearly prevented the salvation of the universe. The warrior who had led the largest armada in history became one of humanity's strongest advocates for peaceful cooperation. The Prometheus itself became a symbol of hope throughout the galaxy. The ship that aliens had feared, as the ultimate weapon, was revealed to be the ultimate tool of preservation. Humanity's willingness to risk everything to save everyone, including their enemies, established them as natural leaders in the galactic community. And in the depths of space, where reality itself had been torn and was now healed, the fabric of the universe continued its eternal dance, stable and secure for countless generations to come. Time flowed normally once again, carrying the stories of all species toward a future that would exist because one species had dared to look beyond their own survival and work to save everything that existed. The moment when time stood still had become the moment when the universe was reborn.
The stars had never seemed so cold. High Admiral Vorthon stood at the observation window of his flagship, the Time's Eternal Conquest asterisk, and watched the distant yellow sun that the humans called Sol. It was a small star, unremarkable in every way. The planet they called Earth orbited in what his scientists called the habitable zone. Not too hot, not too cold, A world of water and green growing things and soft creatures who had only just learned to reach beyond their own sky. He had studied them. For 3 years, he had studied them. The Kethral Dominion had conquered 17 star systems in the past 300 years. They had crushed species far older and more advanced than these humans. They had built an empire that stretched across 1,000 light years, and they had done it through simple, brutal mathematics. More ships, more soldiers, more firepower. When you had enough of all three, victory was not a question. It was a certainty. Vorthon's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. He was tall, even for a Kethral, nearly 3 meters of hardened exoskeleton, compound eyes that could see in spectrums these humans could not imagine, and 4 arms that had personally killed more enemies than he could count. He had earned his position through blood and conquest, and he had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start now. "High Admiral," a voice said behind him. "The human response has been detected." Vorthon turned to face his intelligence officer, a younger Kethral named Kethros. The officer's posture showed confusion, which was unusual. Kethros was one of the finest analytical minds in the fleet. "Show me," Vorthon commanded. The main display flickered to life, showing a tactical readout of the human star system. There was Earth, 3rd planet from the sun. There was their moon, where the humans had established their first off-world colonies a mere century ago. There were scattered stations and outposts throughout their system, mining operations, research facilities, the crude infrastructure of a species just beginning to spread beyond their birth world. And there, moving to intercept the Kethral fleet, was the human military response. Vorthon stared at the display for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of a predator who had just realized that his prey was even more helpless than he had imagined. 47 ships, Kethros said, his voice carrying that same confusion. "High Admiral, they have sent 47 ships. I can count," Vorthon replied, still laughing. "Show me the fleet composition." The display zoomed in on the human formation. The ships were small, pathetically small. Their largest vessel, which human communications identified as the Times TDS Defiance *, was barely 400 meters long. A Kethral supply frigate was larger. The Kethral dreadnoughts that formed the core of Vorthon's fleet were over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. "They call this the United Terran Defense Fleet," Kethros continued. "According to our intelligence, this represents their entire military capability. Every combat-ready vessel their species possesses." Vorthon's laughter died slowly. He turned to look at the officers assembled on his command deck, weapons specialists, tactical advisors, ship commanders who had joined the flagship for this historic moment. All of them wore expressions of disbelief and amusement. "Every ship," Vorthon repeated. "They have sent every ship they have." "Yes, High Admiral." "Against 800 of ours." "Yes, High Admiral." One of the weapons officers, an old veteran named Gormoth, made a sound of contempt. "They must know they cannot win. Perhaps this is some form of ritual, a ceremonial gesture before surrender." "Perhaps," Vorthon agreed. "Or perhaps they are simply stupid." He had spent years studying human broadcasts, trying to understand these strange creatures. What he had learned was not impressive. They were soft-bodied, fragile beings who could not survive without artificial assistance in most environments. They lived short lives, barely a century at most, and spent much of that time fighting among themselves. Their history was an endless cycle of war, disease, and self-destruction. They had nearly rendered their own planet uninhabitable through carelessness and greed. They had built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, and then they had actually used some of them against each other. They were, by any reasonable measure, a species that should have gone extinct long before reaching the stars. And yet they had survived. Somehow, against all logic, they had survived. Vorthon had found this mildly curious, but not particularly relevant. Survival was not the same as strength. A pest could survive by hiding in the walls. That did not make it dangerous. "Record this moment," he ordered. "I want a full visual and tactical record of what happens here today. Future generations of the Dominion should see this. It will be educational, a perfect example of what happens when a primitive species fails to recognize its own limitations." "At once, High Admiral," Kethros replied. The tactical display showed the human fleet holding position near the 4th planet of their system, a red world they called Mars. They were not advancing to meet the Kethral armada. They were waiting. What are they doing? Gormoth asked. If they intend to fight, why are they not attacking? Perhaps they are hoping we will change our minds, another officer suggested. Perhaps they believe that showing us their entire fleet will convince us to negotiate. Vorthon considered this. The Kethril had sent the humans an ultimatum 3 months ago. Surrender, and they would be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. Refuse, and they would be destroyed. It was a generous offer, more generous than the Kethril had made to most species. Vorthon had expected the humans to accept immediately. Instead, they had sent a message back. A single word in their crude language. No. No explanation. No counteroffer. No attempt at diplomacy. Just, no. Vorthon had been annoyed at first, then amused. The humans clearly did not understand what they were dealing with. They would learn soon enough. Signal the fleet, he commanded. All ships to advance in standard conquest formation. We will give them one final chance to surrender. If they refuse, destroy them all. The order went out across the Kethril Armada. 800 ships, dreadnoughts, cruisers, frigates, carriers filled with fighter craft began to move forward. It was a sight that had terrified 17 civilizations into submission. A wall of metal and firepower that blotted out the stars. The humans did not move. On the bridge of the Times TDS Defiance *, Commander Elena Vasquez watched the alien fleet approach. She was 43 years old, with dark hair cut short for practical reasons, and eyes that had seen too much. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts on Earth before being selected for this posting: the First War against the Pacific Federation, the South American Rebellion, and the ugly business in Central Asia that nobody talked about anymore. She had killed before. She had ordered others to kill. She had watched friends die in the vacuum of space and kept giving orders because that was what commanders did. But she had never seen anything like this. Tactical, give me a count, she said, keeping her voice calm. 812 vessels confirmed, Lieutenant Chen replied from the sensor station. 47 capital ships in the Dreadnought class, 206 cruisers. The rest are frigates and support craft. They're carrying approximately 2,000 fighter craft in their carriers. Power readings. Their main weapons draw about 3 times as much power as ours. Shield generators are proportionally stronger. Their point defense systems are. Chen paused, checking his readings. Actually, their point defense is surprisingly weak. They seem to rely on armor and shields, rather than active interception. Vasquez nodded slowly. That was consistent with the intelligence they had gathered over the past 3 years. The Kethril had never encountered an enemy who could threaten them with anything small enough to require point defense. They had always fought with overwhelming force against inferior opponents. They had no idea what they were flying into. Status of the network? Vasquez asked. All 47 ships reporting green. Tactical AI is online and coordinating. Weapon systems are primed and ready. The swarm is deployed and waiting for activation. The swarm. That was the unofficial name for the 3,000 autonomous kill vehicles that were currently drifting in the space between the 2 fleets. Each one was about the size of a football. Painted black, running on minimal power to avoid detection. They had been launched days ago, positioned with mathematical precision along the predicted approach vectors of the alien fleet. The Kethril sensors had not detected them. They were too small, too quiet, and the Kethril had never encountered anything like them before. Their entire military doctrine was built around the assumption that threats came from big ships with big guns. It was, Vasquez reflected, a very human solution. When you could not match your enemy's strength, you did not try. You found another way. You cheated. Humanity had been cheating at war since the first cave dweller picked up a rock and threw it at something bigger than himself. Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship, the communications officer reported. Put it through. The main display flickered, and Vasquez found herself looking at the alien commander for the first time. High Admiral Vorthon was exactly as the intelligence briefings had described. Tall, insectoid, intimidating. His compound eyes reflected the light of his bridge in 1,000 tiny points. Human commander, Vorthon said, his words translated by the ship's computers into flat, emotionless English. You have one final opportunity to surrender. Your fleet is insignificant. Your weapons are primitive. You cannot hope to win this battle. Accept the Dominion's offer, and your people will be allowed to live. Vasquez said nothing. She simply stared at the alien face on her screen and waited. Your silence accomplishes nothing, Vorthon continued. We have studied your species. We know your history, your wars, your cruelty, your endless capacity for self-destruction. You are a violent, primitive species that has barely learned to travel between worlds. The Dominion has conquered civilizations far greater than yours. You are not special. You are not unique. You are simply the next name on a very long list. Still, Vasquez did not respond. Vorthon's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation. Very well. If you will not speak, then listen. This is your final chance. Surrender now, or die. The choice is yours. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. It was not a friendly smile. You studied our broadcasts, she said quietly. You watched our wars. You saw what we did to each other, the bombs, the gas, the machines we built to kill as efficiently as possible. And you thought that made us weak? Vorthon's compound eyes shifted slightly. I thought it made you self-destructive. A species that turns such weapons against itself is clearly practiced. Vasquez interrupted. A species that turns such weapons against itself is practiced. She leaned forward in her command chair. You're right about one thing, Admiral. We are violent. We are cruel. We have spent our entire existence finding new and creative ways to kill each other. We have refined the art of destruction to a level you cannot imagine. You are boasting, Vorthon said, but there was something uncertain in his translated voice. Am I? Vasquez shook her head. You brought 800 ships because you thought you needed overwhelming force. We brought 47 because we knew we didn't. You measure strength in numbers. We measure it differently. And how do you measure it? Vasquez's smile disappeared. You're about to find out. She cut the transmission. For a moment, the bridge of the Defiance Times was silent. Then Lieutenant Chen spoke up from the sensor station. Commander, the enemy fleet is still advancing. No change in formation. They don't appear to be raising shields. They don't think they need to, Vasquez replied. They still think this is going to be easy. She pressed a button on her command chair, opening a channel to all 47 ships of the fleet. All ships. This is Defiance Actual. The enemy has been warned. They have chosen to continue. As of this moment, we are at war. She paused, letting those words sink in. You all know what's at stake. You all know why we're here. Behind us is Earth. Behind us is everyone we've ever loved. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. There is only victory or extinction. She took a deep breath. Activate the swarm. Fire at will. 3,000 kilometers ahead, 3,000 small black objects came to life. Their sensors identified targets. Their tiny engines fired, adjusting trajectories. Their payloads micro-singularity warheads, each capable of creating a momentary black hole no larger than an atom, armed themselves. The first kill vehicle reached its target in less than 4 seconds. On the bridge of the Times Eternal Conquest *. High Admiral Vorthon was still composing his thoughts when the cruiser Times Dominion's Pride Times simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion. There was no debris. One moment the ship was there, and the next moment it was gone as if someone had simply erased it from reality. What? Vorthon started to say. Then the second ship vanished, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. Report! Vorthon screamed. What is happening? Unknown, High Admiral, Kethros shouted back, his voice cracking with terror. Sensors show no attack, no weapons fire. The ships are simply another flash of impossible darkness, and another Kethril vessel was gone. Vorthon watched in frozen horror as his fleet began to die. Ships were vanishing at the rate of one every few seconds now. There was no pattern he could see. No way to predict which vessel would be next. Some were dreadnoughts. Some were frigates. Some were in the center of the formation. Some were on the edges. It did not matter. Whatever was killing them did not care about size or position or strength. Shields, Vorthon bellowed. All ships raise shields. Evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. The swarm had already found its targets. The kill vehicles were too small to see, too fast to intercept, too numerous to stop. Each one carried its tiny payload directly to its predetermined target and detonated, creating a microscopic black hole that existed for less than a second, but consumed everything within a 10-meter radius before evaporating. 10 meters was enough. When that 10 meters was inside your engine room, your bridge, or your weapons magazine. It was more than enough. In the first 5 minutes of the Battle of Seoul, the Kethral Dominion lost 114 ships without firing a single shot, and the human fleet had not even begun to move. Vorthon stared at the tactical display, watching the blue dots of his fleet wink out one by one, and felt something he had not felt in 200 years of conquest: fear. He had scoffed at the small armada. He had laughed at their pathetic response. He had dismissed them as primitives, as prey, as the next easy conquest in a long line of easy conquests. He had been wrong, and now, watching his invincible fleet die around him, High Admiral Vorthon began to understand what he was truly facing. Not a primitive species, not helpless prey, something far worse, a species that had been killing since before his ancestors had learned to make fire. A species that had refined destruction into an art form, a species that had built weapons too terrible to imagine, and then pointed them at themselves and survived. The humans had sent a small fleet because they had not needed a large one, and Vorthon, for the first time in his long life, began to understand that he might not survive the day. The silence on the bridge of the time's eternal conquest times lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Every officer stood frozen at their station, watching the tactical display as ship after ship disappeared from existence. The blue dots that represented the Kethral fleet were vanishing faster than the computer could update the count. High Admiral Vorthon forced himself to move, forced himself to think. He had not survived 200 years of warfare by surrendering to panic, and he would not start now. Analysis, he barked. What is killing our ships? Kethros was already working at his station, his 4 hands moving across multiple displays simultaneously. The damage patterns suggest internal detonation, but there is no explosive signature, no radiation, no energy release consistent with any known weapon. His voice trembled slightly. High Admiral, the ships are not being destroyed, they are being erased. Sections of them are simply ceasing to exist. That is impossible. The evidence suggests otherwise. Vorthon's mandibles clicked in frustration. He turned to the weapons officer. Gormoth, return fire. Target the human fleet. With what, High Admiral? Gormoth replied, his voice carrying a note of desperation. Our weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat. The human vessels are still at extreme range, and even if they were closer, we have no target lock. Whatever is attacking us is too small for our sensors to detect. Too small. The words echoed in Vorthon's mind. The Kethral had never considered something too small to detect as a threat. Their enemies had always come at them with fleets, with armies, with weapons they could see and measure and counter. This was something different. Something new. Something terrifying. Shields are holding, the tactical officer reported. The attacks are not penetrating our defensive screens. For a moment, Vorthon felt a surge of hope. If the shields could stop these invisible weapons, perhaps. High Admiral, Kethros interrupted, his voice hollow. I have identified the attack vector. The weapons are not being fired at our ships. They were already in position, thousands of small devices, deployed in our path before we arrived. They are passing through the gaps in our shield coverage, the exhaust ports, the sensor apertures, the communications arrays. Seal everything. Maximum shield density. We cannot, High Admiral. If we seal everything, we lose engines, sensors, and communications. We would be blind, deaf, and motionless. Vorthon understood then. The humans had designed a weapon specifically to exploit the fundamental weaknesses of any shielded vessel. A ship needed openings to function, places where energy and matter could flow in and out. The humans had created something small enough to find those openings and deadly enough to destroy from within. It was not superior firepower. It was not overwhelming force. It was intelligence. Cunning. The kind of tactical thinking that came from a species that had spent millennia finding ways to kill things bigger and stronger than itself. Signal the fleet, Vorthon commanded, forcing calm into his voice. All ships are to form defensive sphere. Dreadnoughts in the center, smaller vessels on the perimeter. We will use our frigates as shields for our capital ships. It was a brutal order. He was sacrificing hundreds of smaller vessels and their crews to protect the dreadnoughts, but it was the only option he could see. The smaller ships might die, but they would clear a path through the human weapon field, allowing the heavy ships to reach their enemy. The fleet began to reorganize. Ships that had been advancing in standard formation started pulling together, clustering around the massive dreadnoughts like prey animals circling their young. It was a defensive posture, something the Kethril had not used in generations. On the bridge of the Times TDS Defiance *, Commander Vasquez watched the enemy reorganization with cold satisfaction. "They are adapting," Lieutenant Chen reported, "forming a defensive sphere. They are sacrificing their outer ships to clear a path for the dreadnoughts." "Expected," Vasquez replied. "How many kills from the swarm?" 187 confirmed. "Approximately 212 kill vehicles remaining. Hold the rest in reserve. Let them think they have solved the problem." Around her, the crew of the Times Defiance Times worked with focused efficiency. There was no celebration at the enemy losses, no cheering or congratulations. Everyone on this ship understood what was at stake. They had hurt the enemy badly, but the battle was far from over. 600 Kethril ships still advanced toward Earth, and the human fleet was still vastly outnumbered. Signal from Admiral Chen Wei on the Times Indomitable *, the communications officer reported. "Put him through." The face of the fleet commander appeared on her personal display. Chen Wei was older than Vasquez, with gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had commanded ships for longer than she had been alive. He had been one of the architects of the defense plan, one of the strategists who had looked at the impossible odds and found a way to fight. "Commander," he said quietly. "Excellent work with the swarm. Phase 1 is complete." "Thank you, Admiral. The enemy is reorganizing as predicted." "Yes. They are protecting their heavy ships, which means they recognize the threat but do not understand it." Chen Wei's expression was unreadable. "They think our microweapons are our primary armament. They think if they can shield against them, they can reach us and destroy us with conventional force. They're wrong. Very wrong. Begin Phase 2. Time to show them what human ships can do." The connection ended. Vasquez took a deep breath and opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships. This is Defiance Actual. Execute Pattern Delta. Engage at will." The United Terran Defense Fleet came alive. From the perspective of the Kethril, what happened next was impossible. Human ships that had been holding positions suddenly accelerated, not slowly, not gradually, but instantly. One moment they were stationary. The next they were moving at speeds that should have killed every crew member aboard. "What?" Vorthon started to say, but the words died in his throat. The human ships were not just fast, they were impossibly agile. They changed direction without slowing down, executing maneuvers that defied every law of physics the Kethril understood. A ship moving at 1/10 the speed of light suddenly turned 90 degrees and continued at the same velocity. Another reversed course entirely, stopping and accelerating in the opposite direction in less than a second. "How are they doing that?" Gormoth demanded. "The acceleration alone should turn their crews to paste." "Inertial dampening," Kethros replied, his voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "They must have developed inertial dampening technology far beyond anything we possess. Their ships are not fighting physics, they are ignoring it." The human fleet split into 7 groups, each containing 6 or 7 ships. They moved in perfect coordination, flowing around and between the Kethril formation like water through rocks. There was no hesitation, no confusion. Every ship seemed to know exactly where every other ship was and exactly what it was going to do. "They are networked," Kethros realized. "Their ships are not being commanded individually. They are linked together, one tactical intelligence controlling all 47 vessels as a single organism." Vorthon understood what that meant. His fleet was controlled by individual captains, each making their own decisions, coordinating through communication channels that required time and interpretation. The humans had eliminated that delay. Their entire fleet thought with one mind, reacted with one will. It was not just superior technology, it was a fundamentally different approach to warfare. "Target the nearest human group," Vorthon commanded. "Concentrate all firepower." The Kethril dreadnoughts opened fire. Massive energy beams lanced across space, each one capable of melting through a kilometer of solid rock. Plasma torpedoes followed, thousands of them, filling the void with deadly light. The human ships danced between them. It was, Vorthon realized with growing horror, exactly that simple. The humans saw every attack coming, knew every trajectory, and simply were not there when the weapons arrived. Their ships moved with inhuman precision, avoiding destruction by margins so small they could be measured in meters, and they were returning fire. Unlike the invisible swarm weapons, the human ships used visible armaments, but nothing like what Vorthon had expected. Thin beams of coherent light stabbed out from the human vessels, but they did not target the Kethral ships themselves. Instead, they targeted the plasma torpedoes that the Kethral had launched. "Point defense," Gormoth said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "They are shooting down our torpedoes. Not some of them. All of them." Every plasma torpedo that the Kethral launched was intercepted and destroyed before it could reach its target. The humans were not just avoiding the Kethral attacks, they were dismantling them in flight. "What about our energy weapons?" Vorthon demanded. "Ineffective, High Admiral. The human ships are too maneuverable. Our weapons cannot track them." Gormoth paused, checking his readouts. "Additionally, when our beams do connect, the human shields absorb them. Their shield technology appears to be unconventional." "Unconventional how?" "I do not know, High Admiral. The energy signatures do not match anything in our database." The battle was barely 15 minutes old, and Vorthon could already see the shape of his defeat. His fleet had the numbers, the firepower, the raw strength, but the humans had rendered all of that meaningless. They were fighting a different kind of war, one where speed and precision and intelligence mattered more than brute force. "High Admiral," Kethros said quietly, "I am receiving casualty reports from the fleet. We have lost 214 ships. Human losses." He paused, checking his data. Zero. 214 Kethral vessels destroyed, and the humans had not lost a single ship. "That will change," Vorthon said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Eventually we will overwhelm them. They cannot dodge forever." Even as he spoke, he watched one of the human ship groups execute another impossible maneuver, sweeping past a Kethral cruiser and leaving it a spreading cloud of debris. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were attacking, and every attack found its target. The human weapons were as strange as their ships. Some were kinetic, simple metal projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. At such velocities, even a small piece of metal carried more energy than a nuclear weapon. Other weapons were harder to understand. One seemed to fire packets of contained antimatter that detonated on contact with matter, converting both into pure energy. Another projected fields that disrupted the molecular bonds of anything they touched, causing solid metal to simply fall apart into its component atoms. Each weapon was different. Each was devastating, and the humans deployed them with surgical precision, never wasting a shot, never missing a target. "They have been preparing for this," Kethros said softly, almost to himself. "They knew we were coming. They have been preparing for years." "Of course they have," Vorthon replied bitterly. "We announced ourselves. We sent them an ultimatum. We gave them time to prepare." It had seemed like a gesture of overwhelming confidence at the time. The Kethral always announced their conquests in advance. It was tradition, a way of demonstrating their power and giving inferior species a chance to surrender before the slaughter began. Now Vorthon understood that it had been the worst mistake of his career. The humans had used that time. They had studied the Kethral, analyzed their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. They had built countermeasures not to match the Kethral strength for strength, but to render that strength irrelevant. And they had done it all with 47 ships. "High Admiral," the communications officer interrupted. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet. They are requesting communication." Vorthon hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse, to continue fighting until one side or the other was destroyed. But another part of him, the part that had kept him alive through 2 centuries of warfare, knew that he needed to understand what he was facing. "Put it through," he commanded. The face that appeared on his display was not Commander Vasquez. It was an older human male, gray-haired, with a calm expression that seemed entirely at odds with the chaos of the battle around him. "High Admiral Vorthon," the human said. "I am Admiral Chen Wei, commander of the United Terran Defense Fleet. I believe we should talk." "Talk?" Vorthon's mandibles clicked in anger. "You are destroying my fleet. Why would I talk to you?" "Because I want to give you a chance to understand what you are fighting before any more of your people die." Chen Wei's expression did not change. "You studied our broadcasts. You saw our wars, our weapons, our capacity for destruction, but you drew the wrong conclusion. You thought our violence made us weak. You are weak. You are short-lived, fragile creatures who..." Who have survived everything the universe has thrown at us, Chen Wei interrupted. Ice ages, plagues, asteroids, and yes, each other. We have spent 10,000 years trying to destroy ourselves, and we are still here. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know what that means, High Admiral? It means we are very, very good at not dying. Vorthon said nothing. You thought you were conquering a primitive species, Chen Wei continued. You were wrong. You are trying to conquer the most dangerous thing in this galaxy, a species that has already conquered itself. Every weapon you have seen today was originally designed for use against humans, by humans. We have been innovating ways to kill each other since before your ancestors left their homeworld. This is supposed to frighten me. It is supposed to inform you. Your fleet outnumbers us nearly 20 to 1. You have more firepower, more ships, more soldiers, and you are losing. Do you understand why? Vorthon did not answer, but he knew. He had known since the first ships started vanishing. The humans were not stronger than the Kethral. They were smarter. They fought not with overwhelming force, but with overwhelming ingenuity. They had looked at the impossible odds and found a way to win anyway. I am offering you a choice, Chen Wei said. You can continue this battle. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your soldiers will die. And in the end, you will have accomplished nothing except teaching humanity that the universe is hostile. His eyes hardened. Or you can withdraw, take what remains of your fleet, and return to your dominion. Tell them what you have learned today. Tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. The Dominion does not retreat. Vorthon said automatically. Then the Dominion will die here, Chen Wei replied simply. The choice is yours, High Admiral, but I suggest you make it quickly. Every minute we spend talking, more of your ships are dying. The transmission ended. Vorthon stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by officers who looked to him for leadership, for answers, for some way out of this nightmare. The tactical display showed his fleet what remained of it still fighting, still dying, still trying to destroy an enemy that refused to be destroyed. 300 ships left, perhaps fewer, and the human fleet was still intact. All 47 ships, still dancing between the Kethral weapons, still striking with deadly precision, still winning. Vorthon had never retreated in his life. He had never known defeat. He had built his entire existence on the principle that superior force always won. Today, he learned that he was wrong. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. All ships are to fall back. Minimum safe distance from the human system. We will regroup. It was not a retreat, not officially, but everyone on the bridge knew what it meant. The Kethral Dominion had attacked humanity with 800 ships. They were leaving with less than 300. And somewhere on the bridge of the Times TDS Defiance *, Commander Elena Vasquez allowed herself a small, grim smile. The battle was not over. The war was not won. But humanity had proven something today. They could fight, and they could win. The small armada had done what it was built to do. Now came the hard part. The retreat of the Kethral fleet was not a quiet thing. It was chaos. Ships that had never known defeat now fled in disarray, their captains giving conflicting orders, their crews struggling to understand what had just happened. The formation that had seemed so imposing just hours ago now looked like a wounded animal. Bleeding vessels and escape pods as it limped away from the human system. High Admiral Vorthon stood alone in his private chambers aboard the Times Eternal Conquest *, staring at the tactical records of the battle. He had watched them 17 times now, trying to find the moment where everything had gone wrong, trying to find the mistake that had cost him more than 500 ships and 300,000 soldiers. He could not find it because the mistake had been made before the battle even started. The mistake was believing that the Kethral could not lose. A chime announced a visitor. Vorthon did not respond, but the door opened anyway. Only one person on the ship had that authority. Kethros entered quietly, his posture showing the kind of careful respect that subordinates showed when their commanders were in dangerous moods. High Admiral, the fleet commanders have assembled as you requested. I did not request an assembly. You ordered one 3 hours ago, High Admiral, before you came here. Vorthon blinked, trying to remember. The hours since the retreat had blurred together into a haze of shock and disbelief. He had given orders, many orders, but he could not recall most of them. Very well, he said finally. I will address them shortly. But first, tell me what you have learned. Kethros moved to a display and activated it. The tactical record of the battle appeared. with human ships highlighted in red and Kethral ships in blue. I have completed my initial analysis. The results are troubling. More troubling than losing 500 ships to a force 1/20th our size? Yes, High Admiral. Much more troubling. Kethros manipulated the display, zooming in on the human fleet. We know now that the initial attack, the invisible weapons that destroyed our ships from within, used micro-singularity warheads. Each weapon created a tiny black hole that existed for less than 1 second before evaporating. Micro-singularities. That is theoretical technology. Our own scientists have said it would take centuries to develop. Our scientists were wrong. Or perhaps they were right. And the humans simply developed it faster. Kethros paused. High Admiral, consider what this means. The humans have not just built weapons we cannot match. They have built weapons we cannot imagine. They have achieved theoretical breakthroughs that our entire dominion has failed to achieve in 1,000 years. Vorthon felt something cold settle in his stomach. What else? Their ships. We believed their small size was a weakness, evidence of their primitive capabilities. We were wrong. Kethros brought up a diagram of a human vessel. Their ships are small because they chose to make them small. Every meter of space is optimized for performance. Their engines produce thrust that our models say should be impossible. Their inertial dampeners allow acceleration that would kill any Kethral crew. And their shields? What about their shields? They do not work like our shields. Our shields absorb energy by distributing it across a field. Their shields appear to redirect energy entirely, sending it somewhere else. We do not know where. They may have developed some form of dimensional shunting technology. Kethros's voice dropped. High Admiral. We hit their flagship with a full dreadnought barrage. Our sensors registered a direct hit. The ship emerged without a scratch. Vorthon processed this information slowly. Every word made the situation worse. The humans were not just clever, they were operating on a technological level that the Kethral had not even imagined was possible. How? He asked finally. Their civilization is barely 4,000 years old. We have been building ships for 20,000 years. How can they possibly be this advanced? Kethros was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. High Admiral, I have a theory. It is not one you will enjoy hearing. Tell me anyway. The humans spent most of their history killing each other. Wars. Constantly. Not the kind of wars we fight. Organized conflicts between nations with clear objectives and rules. They fought wars of extermination. Wars of hatred. Wars where the only goal was to destroy the enemy completely. I know this. It is why we thought they would be easy to conquer. Yes. But consider what such constant conflict would produce. Kethros manipulated the display, showing images from human broadcasts. Wars, weapons, destruction on a scale that made Kethral conquests look gentle. Every generation, they built better weapons. Every war, they learned new ways to kill. They developed nuclear weapons devices capable of destroying entire cities, and then they used them. They built biological weapons, chemical weapons, and things even worse. And they did this to each other. Vorthon stared at the images. He had seen them before, during his research. He had thought they showed a weak, self-destructive species. Now he saw them differently. They are specialists, Kethros continued. They have been practicing the art of destruction for their entire existence. We are conquerors, we fight to take, to control, to expand. They are killers, pure and simple. They fight to destroy. He paused. And they are very, very good at it. The silence stretched between them. Vorthon thought about the human commander's words during the battle. Every weapon you have seen today was originally designed for use against humans, by humans. It was true. The micro-singularity bombs, the relativistic kinetic weapons, the antimatter packets, all of it had been built for human wars. The humans had simply pointed their arsenal outward when the Kethral threatened them. There is more, Kethros said quietly. I have analyzed their tactical patterns, their fleet coordination, the precision of their attacks. He brought up a new display, showing the movement patterns of the human ships. High Admiral, their ships do not just communicate, they think together. Their tactical computers are linked into a single network that processes information faster than any organic mind. They can make decisions in microseconds, adapt to changing conditions instantly, and coordinate their entire fleet, as if it were a single organism. We have networked systems as well. Not like this. Our systems share information. Their systems share thought. It is the difference between soldiers talking to each other and soldiers sharing a single brain. Kethros's mandibles clicked nervously. High Admiral, I do not think we were fighting 47 ships. I think we were fighting one ship with 47 bodies. Vorthon closed his eyes. It was too much. Every revelation made the situation worse, made the enemy more terrifying, made victory seem more impossible. What do you recommend? He asked finally. I do not know, Kethros admitted. Our entire military doctrine assumes we will have superior numbers and firepower. Against the humans, those advantages are meaningless. They fight differently. They think differently. They build weapons we cannot understand and use tactics we cannot predict. He paused. If I am honest, High Admiral, I do not think we can defeat them. Not as we are now. The Dominion has never been defeated. The Dominion has never faced anything like this. Vorthon opened his eyes and looked at his intelligence officer, really looked at him. Kethros was young, but he was brilliant. He had served the Dominion faithfully for decades, providing analysis that had won countless battles. If he said the humans could not be beaten, it was not cowardice speaking. It was honesty. What do the humans want? Vorthon asked. During the battle, their commander offered us a chance to withdraw. He could have destroyed our entire fleet, but he let us retreat. Why? I have been considering that as well, Kethros replied. I believe they want us to survive. Not out of mercy. They have demonstrated they are capable of ruthless efficiency when necessary. I believe they want us to carry a message back to the Dominion. What message? That Earth is not worth the cost of conquest. That any fleet we send will be destroyed. That the humans are not prey, they are predators. Kethros paused. I believe they are trying to deter us from future attacks. Vorthon considered this. It made a certain kind of sense. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming superiority, but they had not pursued the retreating fleet. They had not tried to capitalize on their victory by attacking Kethral territory. They had simply defended their home and let the survivors leave. They are afraid, he said slowly. High Admiral, they are afraid. Not of us, of what we might become. Vorthon's mind was working now, analyzing the situation from a new angle. Think about it, Kethros. They have weapons that could destroy our entire Dominion. They have technology we cannot match. If they wanted to conquer us, they could. But they did not attack. They only defended. You believe they are choosing restraint? I believe they are choosing survival. They know that if they attack us, they start a war of extermination, a war that will not end until one side is completely destroyed. Vorthon's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. They have fought such wars before, among themselves. They know what they cost. They do not want another one. Kethros was silent, processing this analysis. If you are correct, High Admiral, then the humans are offering us a choice. We can accept their existence and leave them alone, or we can force them to unleash their full capabilities against us. Yes. What will you recommend to the Supreme Council? Vorthon did not answer immediately. He thought about his career, his victories, his pride. He thought about the Dominion's long history of conquest and the assumption that they were the greatest power in the galaxy. He thought about the 500 ships he had just lost and the 300,000 soldiers who had died under his command. And he thought about what would happen if the Dominion sent another fleet. A larger fleet. What the humans might build if they believed their survival was truly threatened. I will tell them the truth, he said finally. I will tell them that we attacked a species we did not understand, and we paid the price for our arrogance. I will tell them that the humans are not our enemies unless we force them to be. The Council may not accept that recommendation. Then the Council is welcome to come here and fight the humans themselves. Vorthon's voice hardened. I have seen what they can do. I have watched them destroy 500 of our ships without losing a single one of their own. I will not send more soldiers to die in a war we cannot win. Kethros nodded slowly. And if the Council orders another attack anyway, then I will refuse to lead it. The words hung in the air between them. For a High Admiral of the Dominion to refuse an order was unthinkable. It was treason. It was death. But Vorthon had seen death today, not his own, but the death of everything he believed about the Dominion's invincibility. He had watched his fleet die against an enemy they could not touch, could not hurt, could not even understand. And he had learned something that no other Kethral commander had ever learned. There were things in the universe more dangerous than the Dominion, and one of them lived on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. While the Kethral fleet limped toward home, The human ships maintained their position near Mars. Commander Vasquez had stood down from battle stations, but she had not relaxed. None of them had. Damage report, she said quietly. All 47 ships operational, Lieutenant Chen replied. Minor shield stress on the times. Valiant times and times Endeavor times from near misses. No casualties. No hull breaches. We are at 98% combat effectiveness. 98%. Against a fleet of 800 ships, Vasquez should have felt triumphant. They had won. They had faced impossible odds and emerged virtually unscathed. But she felt no joy, only a cold, hollow sense of relief, and the knowledge that this was not over. What is the status of the alien fleet? Retreating at maximum speed. They have cleared the Mars orbital distance and are still accelerating. Chen paused. Commander, they are not pursuing an attack vector. They are running. Running. The word felt strange. Vasquez had expected the aliens to fight to the last ship, to throw everything they had at Earth in a desperate attempt to win. Instead, they had broken. They had seen what human ships could do, and they had decided that survival was more important than conquest. It was exactly what the defense planners had hoped for. Exactly what Admiral Chen Wei had predicted. Open a channel to the Time's indomitable asterisk. Vasquez ordered. The face of the fleet admiral appeared on her display a moment later. Chen Wei looked tired, the kind of tired that came not from physical exertion but from carrying an impossible weight for too long. Commander, he said. Excellent work today. Thank you, Admiral. But I have questions. I imagine you do. We could have destroyed them completely. When they broke formation to retreat, they were vulnerable. We could have pursued, cut them off, finished them. Vasquez kept her voice neutral, but the question was clear. Why did we let them go? Chen Wei was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. Because killing them all would have been easy. And easy is not what we need right now. I do not understand. The Kethral Dominion controls 17 star systems. They have thousands of ships, billions of soldiers, resources beyond anything we can match. If we had destroyed their fleet completely, every ship, every soldier, what do you think would have happened? Vasquez considered the question. They would have sent another fleet, a larger one, yes, and another after that, and another after that. They would have kept coming until either they conquered us or we destroyed them completely. Chen Wei's expression was grim. We cannot win a war of attrition against an empire that size. We do not have the ships, the soldiers, or the resources. If we fight that kind of war, we will lose eventually, no matter how many battles we win. So we let them retreat. We let them survive. We let them learn. Chen Wei's voice was firm now. Every survivor from that fleet will go home and tell the story of what happened here today. They will describe the weapons we used, the tactics we employed, the losses they suffered, and the Dominion will have to decide, is Earth worth the cost? Vasquez understood then. It was not mercy. It was strategy. The humans had won the battle, but they were fighting a larger war, a war of perception. They needed the Kethral to believe that attacking Earth was not worth the price. And if they decide it is worth the cost, she asked. If they send a larger fleet, then we will destroy it too, Chen Wei replied simply. And we will let the survivors of that fleet go home and tell their story. We will keep doing this until they understand that Earth is not a target. It is a trap. That could take years, decades. It could take centuries. But it is the only strategy that gives humanity a chance at long-term survival. Chen Wei paused. We are not trying to defeat the Dominion, Commander. We are trying to convince them that defeating us is not possible. That is a very different kind of war. Vasquez nodded slowly. It made sense, in a cold, mathematical way. Humanity could not outfight the Dominion in a prolonged conflict, but they could make the cost of conflict so high that the Dominion would choose peace instead. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. We rebuild our ammunition stocks, repair our ships, and continue developing new weapons. Chen Wei's expression softened slightly. And we hope that the Kethral are intelligent enough to learn from their mistake. And if they are not, then we will teach them again, as many times as necessary. Chen Wei straightened in his chair. Get some rest, Commander. You have earned it. But stay ready. This war is not over, it has barely begun. The channel closed, and Vasquez was left alone with her thoughts. Outside her window, The stars burned cold and bright, indifferent to the struggles of the species that lived beneath them. Somewhere out there, an alien empire was trying to decide whether humanity was worth destroying. And somewhere behind her, 8 billion people continued their lives, unaware of how close they had come to extinction. Vasquez did not feel like a hero. She felt like a guard standing at the gate, watching the darkness for threats that might or might not come. It was a weight she would carry for the rest of her life, but she would carry it. Because that was what humans did. They endured. The Supreme Council of the Kethral Dominion did not accept defeat. When High Admiral Vorthon delivered his report, the complete tactical record of the Battle of Seoul, his analysis of human capabilities, and his recommendation to abandon the conquest, the Council listened in silence. And then they told him he was wrong. You failed because you underestimated them. Supreme Commander Zathkul declared from his throne at the center of the council chamber. He was ancient, even by Kethral standards nearly 400 years old. His exoskeleton scarred from battles fought before Vorthon was born. You sent 800 ships against a species you knew nothing about, and you expected an easy victory. Your arrogance cost us those ships, not human superiority. Supreme Commander, I have shown you the tactical data. Data can be interpreted many ways. Zathkul's compound eyes gleamed with cold certainty. The humans surprised you. They had weapons you did not expect, but surprise is not the same as strength. Now that we know what they can do, we can prepare countermeasures. Vorthon felt despair settle into his chest. Their technology is beyond anything we possess. Their micro-singularity weapons, their shield systems, their propulsion, technology can be countered, numbers cannot. Zathkul rose from his throne, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. You attacked with 800 ships. We will send 4,000. Their weapons may be impressive, but they cannot stop endless waves of our fleet. Eventually, they will run out of ammunition. Eventually, they will make mistakes. Eventually, they will fall. And how many ships will we lose in the process? As many as necessary. Zathkul's voice was hard. The Dominion does not retreat. The Dominion does not accept defeat. If we allow these humans to stand after what they have done, every species in our empire will believe we can be challenged. Our entire order depends on the perception of invincibility. Vorthon understood then that reason would not work. The council was not thinking about military reality, they were thinking about political perception. They would sacrifice any number of ships to maintain the illusion that the Dominion could not be stopped. I will not lead this attack, he said quietly. The chamber went silent. Every member of the council turned to stare at him. Zathkul's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise or rage. You refuse a direct order from the Supreme Council? I refuse to lead more soldiers to their deaths in a battle we cannot win. Then you are a traitor. Zathkul's voice was cold. Guards, take the former High Admiral to detention. He will face judgment for his cowardice after we have conquered Earth. Vorthon did not resist as the guards approached. He had known this would happen when he made his choice. But as they led him from the chamber, he turned back to face Zathkul one final time. I have seen what the humans can do, he said. You have not. When your fleet is burning and your soldiers are dying, remember that I warned you. The doors closed behind him, and the Supreme Council began planning their second attack. 3 months later, the largest fleet in the history of the Kethral Dominion departed for the human system. 4,200 ships, every vessel the Dominion could spare from its territories. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, carriers, frigates, troop transports carrying millions of soldiers for the ground invasion that would follow their victory. It was a force designed to overwhelm any defense, to crush any resistance through sheer weight of numbers. Supreme Commander Zathkul himself led the fleet from his command ship, the Times Dominion's Wrath, times the largest and most powerful vessel ever built by Kethral hands. He had studied Vorthon's reports carefully, despite his public dismissal of them. He knew what human weapons could do. He had prepared countermeasures. The Kethral ships now carried improved shields, designed to protect against the micro-singularity weapons. They deployed sensor drones ahead of the main fleet, searching for the small kill vehicles that had devastated Vorthon's force. Their formation was spread wide to prevent a single attack from destroying multiple ships. Zathkul was confident. Surprised enemies could win battles. Prepared enemies won wars. On Earth, the alarms began sounding 3 days before the fleet arrived. Admiral Chen Wei convened an emergency meeting of the United Terran Defense Council in the underground bunker beneath Geneva. Representatives from every nation attended, some in person, some via secure holographic connection. The mood was grim. 4,000 ships, Chen Wei reported, displaying the sensor data on the main screen. Approximately 10 times the size of the first attack force. They have learned from their mistakes, improved shields, spread formation, active countermeasures against our swarm weapons. Can we stop them? The representative from the European Federation asked. Chen Wei was silent for a moment. Not with our current fleet, he admitted. The swarm will be less effective against their new defenses. Our ships are superior individually, but we cannot be in 4,000 places at once. Then what do we do? The representative from the Asian coalition leaned forward, his face pale. Surrender? No. Chen Wei's voice was firm. We do what we have always done. We adapt. We innovate. We find a way to win with the tools we have. What tools? 47 ships against 4,000. 53 ships now. We have been building. Chen Wei manipulated the display, showing the updated fleet roster. And we have been developing new weapon systems we hoped we would never need to use. The display changed to show technical readouts that made several council members gasp. Chen Wei walked them through the new capabilities. Quantum-locked missiles that existed in multiple places simultaneously until the moment of impact, making them impossible to track or intercept. Neural disruption fields calibrated to Kethral brain frequencies, capable of killing every crew member on a ship without damaging the vessel. And something called Project Prometheus, a weapon so terrible that even Chen Wei hesitated before explaining it. Relativistic kill vehicles, he said quietly. Objects accelerated to 99% of the speed of light and aimed at targets. At such velocities, even a small projectile carries the energy of a nuclear weapon. We have hundreds of them deployed throughout the solar system, hidden in asteroid fields and orbiting debris. That is, the European representative trailed off, unable to find words. Terrifying, Chen Wei finished for her. Yes, it is a weapon designed to destroy anything. Ships, stations, planets. We built it because we knew that someday, we might face an enemy we could not defeat any other way. He paused. Today may be that day. The council debated for hours. Some argued for surrender, for accepting Kethral rule, rather than risking the destruction of their species. Others demanded immediate use of the most destructive weapons, regardless of the consequences. But gradually, a consensus emerged. They would fight. They would use every weapon at their disposal. And they would demonstrate, once and for all, that Earth was not a world that could be conquered. One condition, the Asian coalition representative said. If we win when we win, we let the survivors go. Again, Chen Wei nodded. Agreed. We are not trying to destroy the Dominion. We are trying to convince them that we cannot be destroyed. That message only works if someone survives to deliver it. The preparations began immediately. Every ship in the fleet was armed with the new weapons. The swarm was redeployed in different patterns, designed to exploit the gaps in Kethral countermeasures, and the relativistic kill vehicles were aimed and ready, waiting for the command to fire. When the Kethral fleet arrived, the humans were ready. Supreme Commander Zathkul observed the human system with cold satisfaction. His sensor drones had swept ahead of the main fleet, detecting and destroying thousands of the small kill vehicles that had devastated Vorthon's force. His shields were raised, his formation was spread, his weapons were ready, and the human fleet was even smaller than he had expected. 53 ships against 4,000. It was laughable. All ships, advance, he commanded. Standard conquest formation. Destroy any human vessel that resists. Capture any that surrender. The Kethral armada moved forward. A wall of metal and firepower that stretched across millions of kilometers. At its center, the Times Dominion's Wrath Times led the way. Its massive weapons arrays charged and ready to fire. On the bridge of the Times TDS Defiance *, Commander Vasquez watched the enemy approach. 3 months had passed since the first battle, but it felt like a lifetime. She had spent every day training, preparing, trying to find some way to stop the impossible force that was now bearing down on them. Tactical status, she said quietly. 53 ships in formation. Lieutenant Chen replied. All weapon systems online. New countermeasures are ready. The swarm has been redeployed to Pattern Omega. And the RKVs? Armed and ready. Waiting for Admiral Chenway's authorization, Vasquez nodded. The relativistic kill vehicles were their last resort weapons, so destructive that using them would change the nature of the war forever. Once the Kethral understood what humanity could do with such weapons, there would be no going back. The conflict would become a war of extermination, with both sides trying to destroy the other completely. She hoped it would not come to that. Signal from the Admiral, the communications officer reported. Execute Pattern Omega. Engage at will. The Battle of Saul, the second one. Though history would remember it simply as the Great Battle, began with silence. The first wave of Kethral ships crossed into the kill zone that the humans had prepared. Their sensors detected nothing. The swarm had been deployed differently this time, hidden in ways that the Kethral countermeasures could not detect. The ships advanced confidently, shields raised, weapons ready. Then the quantum-locked missiles arrived. Unlike the microsingularity weapons, which were small and nearly undetectable, the quantum missiles were visible. The Kethral sensors saw them coming, tracked their trajectories, and prepared to intercept. It should have been simple, but the missiles existed in multiple places simultaneously. The Kethral weapons fired at one position, only to find that the missile was actually somewhere else. Point defense systems tried to track targets that seemed to teleport randomly through space, and by the time the Kethral commanders understood what was happening, the missiles had already reached their targets. Each warhead carried an antimatter payload. When they detonated, they converted matter directly into energy explosions that outshone the sun for brief, terrible moments. Kethral ships vanished in balls of white fire, their improved shields overwhelmed by forces they were not designed to withstand. 200 ships died in the first 30 seconds. Impressive, Zathkul muttered, watching the destruction on his tactical display. But not enough. Continue the advance. All ships increase speed. The Kethral fleet pressed forward, absorbing losses that would have broken any other military force. They had the numbers to accept such casualties. They had the determination to push through any defense, and they were getting closer to the human ships with every passing second. On the Times Defiance asterisk, Vasquez watched the enemy close the distance. The quantum missiles were effective, but they were not enough to stop 4,000 ships. The swarm was being neutralized by Kethral countermeasures, and the conventional weapons that had worked so well in the first battle were less effective against an enemy who was prepared. Commander, Lieutenant Chen said urgently, the enemy vanguard will reach our position in 12 minutes. We do not have enough firepower to stop them all. I know. Vasquez's voice was calm, but her hands gripped the arms of her command chair tightly. Signal the Admiral. Request authorization for Phase 2. The signal went out. The response came back immediately. Authorization granted. Execute Phase 2. Vasquez closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and gave the order she had hoped she would never have to give. Activate the neural disruptors. Target the enemy fleet. Throughout the human formation, 53 ships broadcast a carefully calibrated electromagnetic signal. It was tuned to the specific frequency of Kethral neural activity, a frequency that human scientists had spent months analyzing from captured data and prisoner interrogations. The signal was harmless to humans. To Kethral, it was death. Aboard every Kethral ship in the broadcast zone, the crew began to die. There was no pain, no warning, simply a sudden cessation of all neural activity. Soldiers dropped where they stood. Officers collapsed over their control consoles. Pilots slumped in their cockpits as their ships continued on their last programmed course. In less than 30 seconds, 300 Kethral ships became drifting tombs. Zathkul watched in horror as the blue dots on his tactical display began to change. Not destroyed, something worse. The ships were intact, but they were not responding. No communications, no course corrections, no signs of life. What is happening? He demanded. Unknown, Supreme Commander. We are detecting some form of electromagnetic signal from the human fleet, but we cannot analyze it. Our crews are. The tactical officer trailed off, checking his readings. Supreme Commander, our crews are dead. All of them. On every ship within range of the signal. Dead. Without a weapon being fired. Without a shot being dodged. The humans had simply killed them from a distance, using a weapon that could not be seen or blocked. Retreat, Zathkul said, his voice hollow. Signal all ships outside the affected zone. Retreat immediately. But it was too late. The human fleet was moving now. spreading out to maximize the coverage of their neural disruptors. More ships entered the kill zone. More crews died. The Kethrel fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes ago, was being slaughtered without a fight. And then the humans deployed their final weapon. The relativistic kill vehicles had been waiting in the outer system, hidden in the asteroid fields and orbital debris that cluttered the edges of human space. They were simple weapons, just chunks of metal with small engines attached, but they had been accelerated for months, building up velocity until they were moving at nearly the speed of light. At such speeds, physics became a weapon. A 1-kilogram projectile carried the energy of a small nuclear bomb. A 10-kilogram projectile could crack a planet. The RKVs that struck the Kethrel fleet were much larger than that. Zathkul saw the first impact on his tactical display, a brief flash of impossible brightness as a Kethrel dreadnought simply ceased to exist. Then another flash. And another. The projectiles were moving too fast to track, too fast to dodge, too fast to even understand. They simply appeared and destroyed. 20 dreadnoughts died in the first volley. Then the second volley arrived. "Supreme Commander," the tactical officer screamed. "We cannot stop them. Our shields, our armor. Nothing can survive an impact at those velocities." Zathkul stood frozen on his bridge, watching his fleet die around him. This was not war. This was extermination. The humans were not fighting them, they were erasing them. "Signal the fleet," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "All ships, full retreat, maximum speed." The order went out, but for many ships, it came too late. The neural disruptors continued their silent massacre. The RKVs continued their devastating strikes. The quantum missiles continued their impossible attacks. When the surviving Kethrel ships finally escaped the kill zone and began their desperate flight home, less than 800 remained. 3,400 ships had been lost. Millions of soldiers had died, and the human fleet had not lost a single vessel. On the bridge of the Times Dominion's Wrath *, Zathkul sat in his command chair and stared at the empty space where his fleet had been. He thought about Vorthon, rotting in a cell back home, and realized that the former High Admiral had been right all along. The humans were not a species to be conquered. They were something far worse, and he had just proven it to the entire galaxy. The retreat was a nightmare. Kethrel ships that had barely escaped the kill zone now fled at maximum speed, their crews traumatized and their commanders desperate to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the human system. No one pursued them. No one needed to. The humans had made their point. Zathkul spent the journey home in his private chambers, trying to compose a message to the Supreme Council. How did you explain a defeat of this magnitude? How did you tell the leaders of an empire that they had sent the largest fleet in history against a primitive species and lost nearly everything? He had been so certain, so confident that numbers would win where Vorthon's arrogance had failed. He had believed that he understood the threat and had prepared adequate countermeasures. He had been a fool. The humans had weapons the Dominion could not match, could not counter, could not even understand. They had killed 3,000 ships without losing a single one of their own. They had technologies that violated the laws of physics as the Kethrel understood them, and they had let the survivors go. Again, that was the part that haunted Zathkul most of all. The humans could have destroyed every last ship in his fleet. They could have pursued the survivors and finished the job. Instead, they had stopped. They had let nearly 800 ships escape. Why? The answer came to him slowly, as the days of travel stretched into weeks. The humans were not trying to destroy the Dominion. They were trying to teach it. Every survivor who returned home would carry the story of what had happened at Sol. Every report, every recording, every traumatized soldier would spread the message that the humans wanted the galaxy to hear. Earth is not worth the cost. It was, Zathkul realized, a brilliant strategy. The humans could not defeat the entire Dominion, not yet, anyway. But they could make the Dominion believe that defeating them was impossible. They could make the cost of conquest so high that even the most aggressive military power would choose peace instead. And it was working. Zathkul sat down at his personal terminal and began composing his message to the council. He did not try to excuse his failure or explain away the defeat. He simply told them the truth. The humans cannot be conquered. Not with 800 ships, not with 4,000, not with 40,000. They have weapons we cannot match and technologies we cannot understand. Every fleet we send will be destroyed, and every defeat will make them stronger. We must make peace. Not because we want to, but because we have no choice. The Dominion has met its equal. He sent the message and then sat in the darkness of his chambers, waiting to see if the council would listen, waiting to see if his people were wise enough to accept the lesson that the humans had taught them, waiting to see if the galaxy would choose survival over pride. Behind him, growing smaller with every passing hour, the human sun burned bright and steady in the void. A small star, orbiting by a small world, defended by a small fleet. But there was nothing small about what that fleet could do. The humans had proven that twice now. Zathkul hoped they would not have to prove it again. The news of the second defeat reached the Dominion homeworld before Zathkul's fleet did. Long-range communications carried the desperate reports from the retreating ships, casualty figures, tactical data, the terrible truth that the largest fleet in Kethrol history had been destroyed by an enemy force less than 1/50th its size. The Supreme Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all 17 conquered worlds were summoned. Military commanders, scientists, diplomats, everyone who might have some insight into what had happened and what should be done about it. And in his cell, High Admiral Vorthon waited. He had been imprisoned for 3 months now, awaiting trial for treason and cowardice. The guards had told him nothing about the second attack, but he had seen the panic in their eyes when they brought his meals. He had heard the distant sounds of chaos in the corridors above. He knew that something terrible had happened. When the cell door finally opened, he expected guards come to execute him. Instead, he found himself facing a delegation from the council itself, 7 senior members, their postures showing the unmistakable signs of fear and uncertainty. High Admiral Vorthon, the lead delegate said, his voice carefully controlled. The council requires your counsel. Vorthon rose slowly from his bench. I thought I was a traitor. That designation has been reconsidered. The delegate's mandibles clicked nervously. Supreme Commander Zathkul's fleet has been destroyed. 3,400 ships lost. The Supreme Commander himself is returning with the survivors, but his status is uncertain. Vorthon closed his eyes. He had warned them. He had told them exactly what would happen, and they had not listened. How many survived? He asked. Approximately 800 ships. The same number I retreated with. Yes, the irony was not lost on anyone present. The council had sent 5 times as many ships and lost 4 times as many, only to end up with exactly the same number of survivors that Vorthon's cowardly retreat had preserved. What does the council want from me? Vorthon asked. Your advice, your analysis. We need to understand what we are facing and how to respond to it. The delegate paused. There are factions within the council. Some believe we should send an even larger fleet. Others believe we should negotiate. And some believe we should simply destroy the human world from a distance, using weapons that do not require our ships to engage directly. Destroy their world? Orbital bombardment, antimatter weapons, planet crackers. The delegate's voice was hollow. Anything to ensure that the humans cannot threaten us again. Vorthon felt something cold settle in his stomach. And what would happen after that? What do you mean? I mean that the humans have demonstrated technologies far beyond our own. If you attack their home world, if you try to exterminate them, do you think they will simply accept it? Vorthon stepped closer to the delegates, his scarred exoskeleton looming over them. They let my fleet retreat. They let Zathkul's fleet retreat. They could have destroyed every single ship, but they chose to let survivors escape. Why do you think that is? The delegates exchanged uncertain glances. They were demonstrating that they are not a threat to us. Vorthon continued. They were showing that they only want to defend themselves, not to conquer. But if you try to destroy their world, if you force them to fight for survival, they will not hold back. He paused, letting his words sink in. We have seen what they can do when they are trying to be merciful. Do you really want to see what they can do when they are not? The delegates were silent. Vorthon could see the fear in their eyes, not fear of him, but fear of the truth he was speaking. The humans are not our enemies, he said quietly. Not yet. They have given us a chance to walk away, to accept that Earth is not ours to take. If we are wise enough to accept that chance, we can survive this. But if we continue to attack them, if we force them to treat us as an existential threat. He shook his head. They have weapons we cannot imagine, technologies that violate the laws of physics as we understand them. They have been killing each other for 10,000 years, and they are still here. Do you really think we can succeed where they themselves have failed? The lead delegate lowered his head. What would you have us do? Make peace, Vorthon replied simply. Send an embassy, not a fleet. Tell them that the Dominion accepts their right to exist and has no further interest in their territory. Ask them what they want, and see if we can give it to them, without sacrificing our honor or our security. The Council will never accept that. They will see it as surrender. Then the Council will lead our people to extinction. Vorthon's voice was hard. The humans are not like the other species we have conquered. They do not think like us, they do not fight like us, and they do not die like us. If we cannot learn to live with them, they will destroy us. It may take years, it may take centuries, but eventually, they will win. Because that is what they do. They survive. And everything that threatens their survival does not. The delegates departed shortly after, leaving Vorthon alone in his cell. But he was not alone for long. Over the following days, a steady stream of visitors came to seek his counsel, military commanders, scientific advisors, diplomats, even members of the council itself. All of them asked the same questions. All of them received the same answers. Make peace. Accept that the humans cannot be conquered. Find a way to coexist. Some listened, some did not. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The faction calling for continued war grew smaller as more reports came in from the retreating fleet. Stories of impossible weapons. Descriptions of ships that moved faster than physics should allow. Accounts of entire crews dying in an instant, killed by something they could not see or understand. The Kethral were warriors, proud of their strength and their conquests, but they were not fools. They could recognize when they were outmatched. 3 weeks after the second battle, the Supreme Council made its decision. A diplomatic mission would be sent to Earth. Terms of peace would be negotiated. The war was over. Vorthon was released from his cell and restored to his rank not because the Council had forgiven his initial refusal to fight, but because they needed his expertise. He was the only Kethral commander who had faced the humans and survived with most of his fleet intact. He was the only one who had any understanding of how they thought. The diplomatic ship departed 2 days later. Commander Elena Vasquez did not attend the peace negotiations. That was a task for politicians and diplomats, not soldiers. Instead, she stood on the observation deck of the Times Defiance asterisk, watching the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. 6 months had passed since the second battle. 6 months of waiting, watching, preparing for another attack that never came. The United Terran Defense Fleet had grown during that time 73 ships now, with more being built every day. New weapons had been developed, new tactics planned. Humanity was ready for war, but war had not come. Instead, a single Kethral ship had approached the solar system, broadcasting peaceful intent. It had been met by a delegation from the United Terran Defense Council, who had escorted it to a space station in Earth orbit. Negotiations had begun, and they were still ongoing. Vasquez did not know what the outcome would be. She hoped it would be peace, real peace, not just a pause before the next attack. But she had learned to be cautious about hope. "Commander," a voice said behind her. "The Admiral wishes to see you." She turned to find Lieutenant Chen standing at the entrance to the observation deck. He looked tired, they all did, these days, but there was something in his eyes that she had not seen in months. "Hope. What is it?" she asked. "They signed the treaty. The war is over." Vasquez stared at him for a long moment, waiting for the words to make sense. Over? Officially ended. The Kethral have agreed to recognize Earth's sovereignty and independence. They have agreed to share scientific and technological information. They have agreed to release all species they have conquered and allow them to form independent governments. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "We won, Commander. We actually won." Vasquez turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the cold light of the stars, an empire that had conquered 17 worlds was agreeing to let humanity go free. An empire that had sent 800 ships, then 4,000 ships, was accepting that it could not defeat 53. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a dream, but it was real. "How?" she asked. "Why would they agree to all that?" "Apparently, they were more afraid of us than we realized." Chen moved to stand beside her, looking out at the stars. Their intelligence analysts studied the battle recordings. They saw what our weapons could do, and they realized that if we wanted to, we could take the war to them. We could build more ships, develop more weapons, and eventually become strong enough to threaten their entire empire. We would never do that. They did not know that. All they knew was that we had beaten them twice, with a fraction of their numbers, and let the survivors go. They thought we were being merciful because we were not ready to attack yet. They thought we were biding our time. Vasquez shook her head slowly. We let them go because we wanted them to learn. We wanted them to understand that we were not a threat, and they did learn. Just not the lesson we intended. Chen smiled slightly. They learned that we were terrifying. They learned that our technology was beyond anything they could match, and they decided that the safest thing to do was to make peace before we decided to use that technology against them. It was, Vasquez realized, a kind of irony. Humanity had tried to demonstrate that it was not aggressive, that it only wanted to defend itself. Instead, it had convinced the Kethral that it was too dangerous to fight. Peace had been achieved not through trust, but through fear. She was not sure how to feel about that. The treaty negotiations concluded 2 weeks later. The final document was signed by representatives of both species in a ceremony broadcast across both human and Kethral space. The terms were everything humanity had hoped for. Recognition of Earth's independence, an end to military hostilities, sharing of scientific knowledge, and the liberation of all conquered worlds. There was one additional clause, added at the request of the human delegation. A new organization would be created, the Galactic Cooperative dedicated to peaceful interaction between species. Any world that wished could join, and all members would agree to resolve disputes through negotiation, rather than war. It was, in a small way, the beginning of something new, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. On the day the treaty was signed, Admiral Chen Wei gave a speech to the United Terran Defense Fleet. His words were broadcast to every ship, every station, every human who cared to listen. We came to space hoping to find friends, he said, his voice quiet but steady. We hoped that meeting other intelligent life would give us something better to be. Instead, we found an enemy, a species that saw us as prey, as targets for conquest. He paused, letting the words settle. We did not want this war. We did not choose it. But when it came, we fought with everything we had, because we had no other choice. On the Times Defiance asterisk, Vasquez listened with her crew around her. Every face was turned toward the speakers, every eye focused on nothing, as they heard their commander speak the words they had all been waiting to hear. Today, that war is over. We have proven that humanity cannot be conquered. We have shown the galaxy that we will not be victims, that we will not be prey. Chen Wei's voice hardened slightly. But we have also shown something else. We have shown that we can be merciful, that we can win a war without exterminating our enemies, that we can defeat an empire and then let it survive. He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice was softer. This is who we are. We are fighters when we have to be. We are builders when we can be. We are survivors. Always. He took a deep breath. The species that scoffed at our small armada will never make that mistake again. But more importantly, the species that wanted to destroy us is now our partner in building something new, something better. We did not become monsters to win this war. We did not abandon our humanity. We held on to who we are, even when it would have been easier to let go. Chen Wei's voice was firm now, carrying the weight of everything they had been through. That is our victory. Not the battles we won, not the ships we destroyed, but the fact that we are still us. Still human, still capable of mercy and hope and peace. The speech ended. Across the fleet, there was silence, not the silence of fear or uncertainty, but the silence of people who had just realized that the worst was over. Vasquez looked at her crew, at Lieutenant Chen, at the helm officers and weapon technicians and engineers who had served beside her through 2 impossible battles. They were tired. They were scarred, in ways that would never fully heal. But they were alive, and they were still human. Well, she said quietly, what do we do now? Chen smiled slightly. I believe the Admiral mentioned something about building something better. Any idea what that looks like? Not a clue. His smile widened. But I think we are going to find out. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Galactic Cooperative grew, as more and more species chose to join an organization that promised peace instead of conquest. Human technology spread across the stars not as weapons of war, but as tools for exploration and construction. The species that had nearly been exterminated became builders, teachers, partners in a vast project of cooperation. The Kethral Dominion transformed as well. Without their military dominance to hold them together, they were forced to find new ways of relating to the species they had once conquered. It was not easy. Old hatreds died slowly, and trust was even harder to build. But gradually, painfully, they began to change. High Admiral Vorthon became one of the first Kethral ambassadors to the cooperative. He spent years working to repair the damage his species had caused, building relationships with humans and other species who had every reason to hate him. When asked why he bothered, why he devoted the rest of his life to a cause that seemed hopeless, he always gave the same answer. Because the humans showed me that it was possible, he would say. They could have destroyed us. They had every right to. But they chose to let us survive. They chose to give us a chance to be better. He would pause then, his compound eyes distant with memory. If they could show that kind of mercy to an enemy that wanted to exterminate them, then the least I can do is try to live up to it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, one of the lead human diplomats, became famous for a conversation she had with a Kethral scholar near the end of the peace negotiations. The scholar had asked the question that haunted all of his species. How had humanity built weapons so far beyond Kethral capability? Because we imagined them for each other first, Tanaka had replied. Every horror you faced at Seoul was originally designed for human targets. The singularity bombs, the neural disruptors, the kill drones. We built them all to use against ourselves. You forced us to point them outward. The scholar had been horrified. You created such weapons to use on your own species? Yes. Tanaka's voice had been sad. We have been killing each other since before your ancestors left their homeworld. We have built weapons that could destroy our planet, and we have come terrifyingly close to using them. We are a species that has never stopped fighting, not our enemies, not our world, not even ourselves. Then how have you survived? Tanaka had smiled then. A small, tired smile that carried the weight of human history. Because we always find a reason to keep going. We fight, yes. We destroy. We cause terrible harm to each other and to our world. But we also love. We create. We hope. We look at the worst parts of ourselves and decide to be better anyway. She had leaned forward then, meeting the scholar's compound eyes with her own. We came to space hoping we could finally stop, she had said, hoping that meeting other intelligent life would give us something better to be. Instead, you taught us that the universe is just as cruel as we feared. Her voice had hardened. So we will do what humans have always done. We will adapt. We will endure. And we will never be prey. The conversation became legendary. It was studied in diplomatic academies, quoted in history books, debated by philosophers across a dozen worlds. It captured something essential about humanity, the strange mix of violence and compassion, destruction and creation, despair and hope, that defined the species. The small armada that had defended Earth became a symbol of something larger. The idea that a species did not have to be the biggest or the strongest to survive, that intelligence and determination and the sheer stubborn refusal to die could triumph over overwhelming force, that the universe, for all its cruelty, could be changed by those willing to fight for something better. Commander Elena Vasquez eventually retired from active service. She spent her later years teaching at the Terran Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers who would defend humanity's place in the galaxy. When asked about the battles she had fought, she rarely spoke of tactics or weapons. Instead, she talked about her crew, about the people who had served beside her, who had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. We did not win because we had better ships, she would tell her students. We won because we had better people, people who believed in something worth fighting for, people who refused to accept that extinction was inevitable. She would pause then, looking at the young faces before her. That is the lesson I want you to learn. The weapons change, the enemies change, but the heart of what we are, the thing that makes us human that never changes. We survived because we chose to survive. And we will keep surviving, no matter what the universe throws at us, because that is what we do. And in the end, that was the truth that the galaxy learned about humanity. Not that they were dangerous, although they were. Not that they were brilliant, although that was true as well, but that they were, above all else, survivors, a species that had looked at the worst parts of itself and decided to keep going anyway, a species that had faced extinction and refused to accept it, The Kethral had scoffed at the small armada because they measured power in ships and weapons and soldiers. They had not understood that humanity measured power differently, in resilience, in adaptability, in the simple, stubborn will to survive. The small armada had proven something that day. Not just that humanity could fight, but that humanity could win. Not just through force, but through something deeper, something that could not be measured in numbers or firepower. The heart of what they were, human,